The Masked Marriage, A Tale of Venice, from Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Dramatis Personae.
Fairy Queen, read by Bookworm 360.
Count d'Adelon, read by Wayne Cook.
Troubadour, read by David Purdy.
Ferdinand Devereux, read by Pelham Flowerdew.
Samuel Pickwick, read by Joanna Michael Hoyt. Gondola after gondola swept up to the marble steps, and left its lovely load to swell the brilliant throng that filled the stately halls of Count Adelon. Knights and ladies, elves and pages, monks and flower girls, all mingled gaily in the dance. Sweet voices and rich melody filled the air, and so with mirth and music the masquerade went on.
"Has your Highness seen the Lady Viola tonight?"
asked a gallant troubadour of the fairy queen who floated down the hall upon his arm.
Yes, is she not lovely, though so sad? Her dress is well chosen, too, for in a week she weds Count Antonio, whom she passionately hates.
"By my faith, I envy him. Yonder he comes, arrayed like a bridegroom, except the black mask. When that is off, we shall see how he regards the fair maid, whose heart he cannot win, though her stern father bestows her hand," returned the troubadour.
"'Tis whispered that she loves the young English artist who haunts her steps and is spurned by the old count,"
said the lady, as they joined the dance. The revel was at its height when a priest appeared, and, withdrawing the young pair to an alcove hung with purple velvet, he motioned them to kneel. Instant silence fell on the gay throng, and not a sound but the dash of fountains, or the rustle of orange groves sleeping in the moonlight, broke the hush, as Count d'Adelon spoke thus.
My lords and ladies, pardon the ruse by which I have gathered you here to witness the marriage of my daughter. Father, we wait your services.
All eyes turned toward the bridal party, and a murmur of amazement went through the throng, for neither bride nor groom removed their masks. Curiosity and wonder possessed all hearts, but respect restrained all tongues till the holy rite was over. Then the eager spectators gathered round the count, demanding an explanation.
Gladly would give it if I could, but I only know that it was the whim of my timid Viola, and I yielded to it. And now, my children, let the play end, unmask and receive my blessing.
But neither bent the knee, for the young bridegroom replied in a tone that startled all listeners as the mask fell, disclosing the noble face of Ferdinand Devereux, the artist lover, and leaning on the breast where now flashed the star of an English earl was the lovely Viola, radiant with joy and beauty.
My lord, you scornfully bade me claim your daughter when I could boast as high a name and vast a fortune as the Count Antonio. I can do more, for even your ambitious soul cannot refuse the Earl of Devereux and De Vere, when he gives his ancient name and boundless wealth in return for the beloved hand of this fair lady, now my wife."
The count stood like one changed to stone, and, turning to the bewildered crowd, Ferdinand added, with a gay smile of triumph,
"To you, my gallant friends, I can only wish that your wooing may prosper as mine has done, and that you may all win as fair a bride as I have by this masked marriage."
S. Pickwick. End of The Masked Marriage. Barriers Swept Away. Chapter 21 of Anne's House of Dreams, by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Narrated by Joanna Michael Hoyt.
Leslie Moore, read by Bookworm 360.
Anne Blythe Shirley, read by Michelle Eaton.
Barriers Swept Away.
Anne,
said Leslie, breaking abruptly a short silence.
You don't know how good it is to be sitting here with you again, working and talking and being silent together.
They were sitting among the blue-eyed grasses on the bank of the brook in Anne's garden. The water sparkled and crooned past them. The birches threw dappled shadows over them. Roses bloomed along the walks. The sun was beginning to be low, and the air was full of woven music. There was one music of the wind in the firs behind the house, and another of the waves on the bar, and still another from the distant bell of the church near which the wee white lady slept. Anne loved that bell, though it brought sorrowful thoughts now. She looked curiously at Leslie, who had thrown down her sewing and spoken with a lack of restraint that was very unusual with her.
On that horrible night when you were so ill,
Leslie went on,
I kept thinking that perhaps we'd have no more talks and walks and works together, and I realized just what your friendship has come to mean to me, just what you meant, and just what a hateful little beast I have been.
Leslie, I never allow anyone to call my friends names.
It's true. That's exactly what I am, a hateful little beast. There's something I've got to tell you, Anne. I suppose it will make you despise me, but I must confess it. Anne, there have been times this past winter and spring when I have hated you.
I knew it,
said Anne calmly.
You knew it?
Yes, I saw it in your eyes.
And yet you went on liking me and being my friend?
Well, it was only now and then you hated me, Leslie. Between times you loved me, I think.
I certainly did, but that other horrid feeling was always there, spoiling it back in my heart. I kept it down. Sometimes I forgot it, but sometimes it would surge up and take possession of me. I hated you because I envied you. Oh, I was sick with envy of you at times. You had a dear little home, and love, and happiness, and glad dreams. Everything I wanted, and never had, and never could have. Oh, never could have. That was what stung. I wouldn't have envied you if I had had any hope that life would ever be different from me. But I hadn't, and it didn't seem fair. It made me rebellious, and it hurt me, and so I hated you at times. Oh, I was so ashamed of it. I'm dying of shame now, but I couldn't conquer it. That night when I was afraid you mightn't live, I thought I was going to be punished for my wickedness, and I loved you so then, Anne. Anne, I never had anything to love since my mother died, except Dick's old dog, and it's so dreadful to have nothing to love. Life is so empty, and there's nothing worse than emptiness, and I might have loved you so much, and that horrible thing had spoiled it.
Leslie was trembling and growing almost incoherent with the violence of her emotion.
Don't, Leslie,
implored Anne.
Oh, don't. I understand. Don't talk of it any more.
I must. When I knew you were going to live, I vowed that I would tell you as soon as you were well, that I wouldn't go on accepting your friendship and companionship without telling you how unworthy I was of it, and I've been so afraid it would turn you against me.
You needn't fear that, Leslie.
Oh, I'm so glad, Anne.
Leslie clasped her brown, work-hardened hands tightly together to still their shaking.
But I want to tell you everything now I've begun. You don't remember the first time I saw you, I suppose? It wasn't that night on the shore.
No, it was the night Gilbert and I came home. You were driving your geese down the hill. I should think I do remember it. I thought you were so beautiful. I longed for weeks after to find out who you were.
I knew who you were, although I had never seen either of you before. I had heard of the new doctor and his bride who were coming to live in Miss Russell's little house. I hated you that very moment, Anne.
I felt the resentment in your eyes. Then I doubted. I thought I must be mistaken. Because why should it be?
It was because you looked so happy. Oh, you'll agree with me now that I am a hateful beast. To hate another woman just because she was happy, and when her happiness didn't take anything from me? That was why I never went to see you. I knew quite well I ought to go. Even our simple Four Winds customs demanded that. But I couldn't. I used to watch you from my window. I could see you and your husband strolling about your garden in the evening, or you running down the poplar lane to meet him. And it hurt me. And yet, in another way, I wanted to go over. I felt that if I were not so miserable, I could have liked you and found in you what I've never had in my life, an intimate, real friend of my own age. And then you remember that night at the shore? You were afraid I would think you crazy. You must have thought I was.
No, but I couldn't understand you, Leslie. One moment you drew me to you, the next you pushed me back.
I was very unhappy that evening. I had had a hard day. Dick had been very hard to manage that day. Generally, he is quite good-natured and easily controlled, you know, Anne. But some days he is very different. I was so heartsick, I ran away to the shore as soon as he went to sleep. It was my only refuge. I sat there thinking of how my poor father had ended his life and wondering if I wouldn't be driven to it some day. Oh, my heart was full of black thoughts. And then you came dancing along the cove like a glad, light-hearted child. I hated you more then than I'd ever done since. And yet I craved your friendship. The one feeling swayed me one moment, the other feeling the next. When I got home that night, I cried for shame of what you must think of me. But it's always been the same when I came over here. Sometimes I'd be happy and enjoy my visit, and at other times that hideous feeling would mar it all. There were times when everything about you and your house hurt me. You had so many dear little things I couldn't have. Do you know, it's ridiculous, but I had an especial spite at those China dogs of yours. There were times when I wanted to catch up Gog and Magog and bang their pert black noses together. Oh, you smile, Anne, but it was never funny to me. I would come here and see you and Gilbert with your books and your flowers and your household gods and your little family jokes and your love for each other showing in every look and word, even when you didn't know it. And I would go home to... You know what I went home to. Oh, Anne, I don't believe I'm jealous and envious by nature. When I was a girl, I lacked many things my schoolmates had, but I never cared. I never disliked them for it, but I seem to have grown so hateful.
Leslie, dearest, stop blaming yourself. You are not hateful or jealous or envious. The life you have to live has warped you a little. Perhaps, but it would have ruined a nature less fine and noble than yours. I'm letting you tell me all this because I believe it's better for you to talk it out and rid your soul of it. But don't blame yourself any more.
Well, I won't. I just wanted you to know me as I am. That time you told me of your darling hope for the spring was the worst of all, Anne. I shall never forgive myself for the way I behaved then. I repented it with tears, and I did put many a tender and loving thought of you into the little dress I made. But I might have known that anything I made could only be a shroud in the end.
Now, Leslie, that is bitter and morbid. Put such thoughts away. I was so glad when you brought the little dress, and since I had to lose little Joyce, I like to think that the dress she wore was the one you made for her when you let yourself love me.
Anne, do you know, I believe I shall always love you after this. I don't think I'll ever feel that dreadful way about you again. Talking it all out seems to have done away with it somehow. It's very strange, and I thought it so real and bitter. It's like opening the door of a dark room to show some hideous creature you've believed to be there, and when the light streams in, your monster turns out to have been just a shadow, vanishing when the light comes. It will never come between us again.
No, we are real friends now, Leslie, and I am very glad.
I hope you won't misunderstand me if I say something else. Anne, I was grieved to the core of my heart when you lost your baby, and if I could have saved her for you by cutting off one of my hands, I would have done it. But your sorrow has brought us closer together. Your perfect happiness isn't a barrier any longer. Oh, don't misunderstand, dearest. I'm not glad that your happiness isn't perfect any longer. I can say that sincerely, but since it isn't, there isn't such a gulf between us.
I do understand that too, Leslie. Now we'll just shut up the past and forget what was unpleasant in it. It's all going to be different. We're both of the race of Joseph now. I think you've been wonderful, wonderful. And Leslie, I can't help believing that life has something good and beautiful for you yet.
Leslie shook her head.
No,
She said dully.
there isn't any hope. Dick will never be better. And even if his memory were to come back, oh, Anne, it would be worse, even worse than it is now. This is something you can't understand, you happy bride. Anne, did Miss Cornelia ever tell you how I came to marry Dick?
Yes.
I'm glad. I wanted you to know, but I couldn't bring myself to talk of it if you hadn't known. And it seems to me that ever since I was 12 years old, life has been bitter. Before that, I had a happy childhood. We were very poor, but we didn't mind. Father was so splendid, so clever and loving and sympathetic. We were chums as far back as I can remember. And Mother was so sweet. She was very, very beautiful. I look like her, but I am not so beautiful as she was.
Miss Cornelia says you are far more beautiful.
She is mistaken, or prejudiced. I think my figure is better. Mother was slight and bent by hard work, but she had the face of an angel. I used just to look up at her in worship. We all worshipped her, Father and Kenneth and I.
Anne remembered that Miss Cornelia had given her a very different impression of Leslie's mother, but had not love the truer vision. Still, it was selfish of Rose West to make her daughter marry Dick Moore.
Kenneth was my brother,
Went on Leslie.
Oh, I can't tell you how I loved him, and he was cruelly killed. Do you know how?
Yes.
Anne, I saw his little face as the wheel went over him. He fell on his back. Anne, I can see it now. I shall always see it. Anne, all I ask of heaven is that that recollection shall be blotted out of my memory. Oh, my God!
Leslie, don't speak of it. I know the story. Don't go into details that only harrow your soul up unavailingly. It will be blotted out.
After a moment's struggle, Leslie regained a measure of self-control.
Then Father's health got worse and he grew despondent. His mind became unbalanced. You've heard all that too?
Yes.
After that, I had just Mother to live for, but I was very ambitious. I meant to teach and earn my way through college. I meant to climb to the very top. Oh, I won't talk of that either. It's no use. You know what happened. I couldn't see my dear little heartbroken mother, who had been such a slave all her life, turned out of her home. Of course, I could have earned enough for us to live on, but Mother couldn't leave her home. She had come there as a bride, and she had loved Father so, and all her memories were there. Even yet, Anne, when I think that I made her last year happy, I'm not sorry for what I did. As for Dick, I didn't hate him when I married him. I just felt for him the indifferent, friendly feeling I had for most of my schoolmates. I knew he drank some, but I had never heard the story of the girl down at the fishing cove. If I had, I couldn't have married him, even for Mother's sake. Afterwards, I did hate him, but Mother never knew. She died, and then I was alone. I was only 17, and I was alone. Dick had gone off in the Four Sisters. I hoped he wouldn't be home very much more. The sea had always been in his blood. I had no other hope. Well, Captain Jim brought him home, as you know, and that's all there is to say. You know me now, Anne, the worst of me. The barriers are all down, and you still want to be my friend.
Anne looked up through the birches, at the white paper lantern of a half-moon drifting downwards to the gulf of sunset. Her face was very sweet.
I am your friend, and you are mine for always,
she said.
Such a friend as I never had before. I have had many dear and beloved friends, but there is a something in you, Leslie, that I never found in anyone else. You have more to offer me in that rich nature of yours, and I have more to give you than I had in my careless girlhood. We are both women and friends forever.
They clasped hands and smiled at each other through the tears that filled the grey eyes and the blue. End of Barriers Swept Away from Anne's House of Dreams. End of Chapter 21 of Anne's House of Dreams.
A Mad Tea Party, Chapter 7 from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll.
Alice, read by Bookworm 360.
March Hare by Eitel.
Hatter, read by Wayne Cook.
Dormouse, read by Jen Broda.
Narrator, read by Peter Yearsley. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them fast asleep, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it and talking over its head.
Very uncomfortable for the dormouse,
thought Alice.
Only, as it's asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind.
The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it.
No room, no room,
they cried out when they saw Alice coming.
There's plenty of room,
said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table.
Have some wine,
the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all round the table, but there was nothing on it but tea.
I don't see any wine,
she remarked.
There isn't any,
said the March Hare.
Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it,
said Alice angrily.
Wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited,
said the March Hare.
I didn't know it was your table,
said Alice.
It's laid for a great many more than 3.
Your hair wants cutting,
said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech.
You should learn not to make personal remarks,
Alice said with some severity.
It's very rude.
The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was,
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Come, we shall have some fun now,
thought Alice.
I'm glad they've begun asking riddles. I believe I can guess that,
she added aloud.
Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it?
said the March Hare.
Exactly so,
said Alice.
Then you should say what you mean,
the March Hare went on.
I do,
Alice hastily replied.
At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know.
Not the same thing a bit,
said the Hatter.
You might as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see.
You might just as well say,
added the March Hare,
that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like.
You might just as well say,
added the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in his sleep.
That I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe.
It is the same thing with you,
said the Hatter, and here the conversation dropped, and the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence.
What day of the month is it?
He said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket, and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it every now and then, and holding it to his ear. Alice considered a little, and then said,
The 4th?
2 days wrong,
sighed the Hatter.
I told you butter wouldn't suit the works,
he added, looking angrily at the March Hare.
It was the best butter,
the March Hare meekly replied.
Yes, but some crumbs must have got in as well,
the Hatter grumbled.
You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife.
The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily. Then he dipped it into his cup of tea, and looked at it again. But he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark.
It was the best butter, you know.
Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity.
What a funny watch,
she remarked.
It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is.
Why should it?
Muttered the Hatter.
Does your watch tell you what year it is?
Of course not,
Alice replied very readily.
But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together.
Which is just the case with mine,
said the Hatter. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly English.
I don't quite understand you,
she said, as politely as she could.
The dormouse is asleep again,
said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said, without opening its eyes,
Of course. Just what I was going to remark myself.
Have you guessed the riddle yet?
the Hatter said, turning to Alice again.
No, I give it up,
Alice replied.
What's the answer?
I haven't the slightest idea,
said the Hatter.
Nor I,
said the March Hare. Alice sighed wearily.
I think you might do something better with the time,
she said,
than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers.
If you knew time as well as I do,
said the Hatter,
you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him.
I don't know what you mean,
said Alice.
Of course you don't,
the Hatter said, tossing his head contemptuously.
I dare say you never even spoke to time.
Perhaps not,
Alice cautiously replied.
But I know I have to beat time when I learn music.
Ah, that accounts for it,
said the Hatter.
He won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock. For instance, suppose it was 9 o'clock in the morning, just in time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a little hint to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner.
only wish it was,
the March Hare said to itself in a whisper.
That would be grand, certainly,
said Alice thoughtfully.
But then I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know.
Not at first, perhaps,
said the Hatter.
but you could keep it to 1:30 as long as you liked.
Is that the way you manage?
Alice asked. The Hatter shook his head mournfully.
Not I.
He replied,
We quarreled last month, just before he went mad, you know.
pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare.
It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. You know the songs, perhaps?
I've heard something like it,
said Alice.
It goes on, you know,
The Hatter continued.
in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle.
Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep.
Twinkle, 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 twinkle.
and went on so long that they had to pinch it to make it stop.
Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse,
said the Hatter,
when the Queen jumped up and bawled out, "He's murdering the time! Off with his head!"
How dreadfully savage!
exclaimed Alice.
And ever since that,
The Hatter went on in a mournful tone,
he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now.
a bright idea came into Alice's head.
Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here?
She asked.
Yes, that's it.
Said the Hatter with a sigh.
It's always tea time. You have no time to watch the things between whiles.
Then you keep moving round, I suppose?
Said Alice.
Exactly so.
Said the Hatter.
As the things get used up.
But what happens when you come to the beginning again?
Alice ventured to ask.
Suppose we change the subject.
The March Hare interrupted, yawning.
I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tell us a story.
I'm afraid I don't know one,
said Alice, rather alarmed at the proposal.
Then the Dormouse shall.
They both cried.
Wake up, Dormouse!
And they pinched it on both sides at once. The Dormouse slowly opened his eyes.
I wasn't asleep.
He said in a hoarse, feeble voice.
I heard every word you fellows were saying.
Tell us a story,
said the March Hare.
Yes, please do,
pleaded Alice.
And be quick about it,
added the Hatter.
Or you'll be asleep again before it's done.
Once upon a time there were 3 little sisters.
The Dormouse began in a great hurry.
And their names were Elsie, Lacie, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well.
What did they live on?
Said Alice, who always took a great interest in questions of eating and drinking.
They lived on treacle,
said the Dormouse, after thinking a minute or two.
They couldn't have done that, you know,
Alice gently remarked.
They'd have been ill.
So they were,
said the Dormouse.
Very ill.
Alice tried to fancy to herself what such an extraordinary way of living would be like, but it puzzled her too much, so she went on.
But why did they live at the bottom of a well?
Take some more tea,
the March Hare said to Alice very earnestly.
I've had nothing yet,
Alice replied in an offended tone.
So I can't take more.
You mean you can't take less?
Said the Hatter.
It's very easy to take more than nothing.
Nobody asked your opinion,
said Alice.
Who's making personal remarks now?
The Hatter asked triumphantly. Alice did not quite know what to say to this, so she helped herself to some tea and bread and butter, and then turned to the Dormouse and repeated her question.
Why did they live at the bottom of a well?
The Dormouse again took a minute or two to think about it, and then said,
It was a treacle well.
There's no such thing.
Alice was beginning very angrily, but the Hatter and the March Hare went, Shh, and the Dormouse sulkily remarked,
If you can't be civil, you'd better finish the story for yourself.
No, please go on,
Alice said very humbly.
I won't interrupt again. I dare say there may be one.
One indeed,
said the Dormouse indignantly. However, he consented to go on.
And so these 3 little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know.
What did they draw?
Said Alice, quite forgetting her promise.
Treacle,
said the Dormouse, without considering at all this time.
I want a clean cup,
interrupted the Hatter.
Let's all move one place on.
He moved on as he spoke, and the Dormouse followed him. The March Hare moved into the Dormouse's place, and Alice, rather unwillingly, took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got any advantage from the change, and Alice was a good deal worse off than before, as the March Hare had just upset the milk jug into his plate. Alice did not wish to offend the Dormouse again, so she began very cautiously.
But I don't understand. Where did they draw the treacle from?
You can draw water out of a water well,
said the Hatter.
so I should think you could draw treacle out of a treacle well. Eh, stupid?
But they were in the well.
Alice said to the Dormouse, not choosing to notice this last remark.
Of course they were.
Said the Dormouse.
Well in.
This answer so confused poor Alice that she let the Dormouse go on for some time without interrupting it.
They were learning to draw.
The Dormouse went on, yawning and rubbing its eyes, for it was getting very sleepy.
And they drew all manner of things. Everything that begins with an M.
Why with an M?
Said Alice.
Why not?
Said the March Hare. Alice was silent. The Dormouse had closed its eyes by this time, and was going off into a doze, but on being pinched by the Hatter, it woke up again with a little shriek, and went on.
That begins with an M, such as mousetraps and the moon, and memory and muchness. You know they say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness?
Really, now you ask me?
Said Alice, very much confused.
I don't think.
Then you shouldn't talk,
said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice, half hoping that they would call after her. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot.
At any rate, I'll never go there again,
said Alice, as she picked her way through the wood.
It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life.
Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it.
That's very curious,
she thought.
But everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once.
And in she went. Once more she found herself in the long hall, and close to the little glass table.
Now I'll manage better this time,
she said to herself, and began by taking the little golden key and unlocking the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket, till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. End of A Mad Tea Party.
By Courier, by O. Henry. Dramatis Personae. Narrator, read by Joanna Michael Hoyt.
Young Man, read by Todd.
Boy, read by Greg Giordano.
The Young Lady, read by Bookworm 360.
Robert Ashburton, read by Wayne Cook.
It was neither the season nor the hour when the park had frequenters, and it is likely that the young lady, who was seated on one of the benches at the side of the walk, had merely obeyed a sudden impulse to sit for a while and enjoy a foretaste of coming spring. She rested there, pensive and still. A certain melancholy that touched her countenance must have been of recent birth, for it had not yet altered the fine and youthful contours of her cheek, nor subdued the arch though resolute curve of her lips. A tall young man came striding through the park, along the path near which she sat. Behind him tagged a boy carrying a suitcase. At sight of the young lady, the man's face changed to red, and back to pale again. He watched her countenance as he drew nearer, with hope and anxiety mingled on his own. He passed within a few yards of her, but he saw no evidence that she was aware of his presence or existence. Some 50 yards further on, he suddenly stopped and sat on a bench at one side. The boy dropped the suitcase and stared at him with wondering, shrewd eyes. The young man took out his handkerchief and wiped his brow. It was a good handkerchief, a good brow, and the young man was good to look at. He said to the boy,
I want you to take a message to that young lady on that bench. Tell her I am on my way to the station, to leave for San Francisco, where I shall join that Alaska moose hunting expedition. Tell her that, since she has commanded me neither to speak nor to write to her, I take this means of making one last appeal to her sense of justice, for the sake of what has been. Tell her that to condemn and discard one who has not deserved such treatment, without giving him her reasons or a chance to explain, is contrary to her nature as I believe it to be. Tell her that I have thus, to a certain degree, disobeyed her injunctions, in the hope that she may yet be inclined to see justice done. Go, and tell her that."
The young man dropped $50 into the boy's hand. The boy looked at him for a moment with bright, canny eyes, out of a dirty, intelligent face, and then set off at a run. He approached the lady on the bench a little doubtfully, but unembarrassed. He touched the brim of the old plaid bicycle cap perched on the back of his head. The lady looked at him coolly, without prejudice or favor.
"Lady,"
he said,
"that gent on that other bench sent yer a song and dance by me. If yer don't know the guy, and he's trying to do the Johnny act, say the word, and I'll call a cop in 3 minutes. If yer does know him, and he's on the square, why I'll spiel yer the bunch of hot air he sent yer."
The young lady betrayed a faint interest.
"A song and dance,"
she said, in a deliberate, sweet voice that seemed to clothe her words in a diaphanous garment of impalpable irony.
"A new idea in the troubadour line, I suppose. I used to know the gentleman who sent you, so I think it will hardly be necessary to call the police. You may execute your song and dance, but do not sing too loudly. It is a little early yet for open-air vaudeville, and we might attract attention."
"Aw,"
said the boy, with a shrug down the length of him.
"Yer know what I mean, lady. 'Tain't a turn. It's wind. He told me to tell yer he's got his collars and cuffs in that grip for a scoot clean out to Frisco. Then he's goin' to shoot snowbirds in the Klondike. He says yer told him not to send round no more pink notes, nor come hanging over the garden gate. And he takes this means of puttin' yer wise. He says yer refereed him out like a has-been, and never give him no chance to kick at the decision. He says yer swiped him, and never said why."
The slightly awakened interest in the young lady's eyes did not abate. Perhaps it was caused by either the originality or the audacity of the snowbird hunter in thus circumventing her express commands against the ordinary modes of communication. She fixed her eye on a statue standing disconsolate in the disheveled park, and spoke into the transmitter.
"Tell the gentleman that I need not repeat to him a description of my ideals. He knows what they have been and what they still are. So far as they touch on this case, absolute loyalty and truth are the ones paramount. Tell him that I have studied my own heart as well as one can, and I know its weaknesses as well as I do its needs. That is why I declined to hear his pleas, whatever they may be. I did not condemn him through hearsay or doubtful evidence, and that is why I made no charge. But since he persists in hearing what he already well knows, you may convey that matter. Tell him I entered the conservatory that evening from the rear to cut a rose for my mother. Tell him I saw him and Miss Ashburton behind the pink oleander. The tableau was pretty, but the pose and juxtaposition were too eloquent and evident to require explanation. I left the conservatory, and at the same time the rose and my ideal. You may carry that song and dance to your impresario."
"I'm shy on one word, lady. Put me wise on that, will yer?"
"Juxtaposition, or you may call it propinquity, or, if you like, being rather too near for one maintaining the position of an ideal."
The gravel spun from beneath the boy's feet. He stood by the other bench. The man's eyes interrogated him hungrily. The boys were shining with the impersonal zeal of the translator.
"The lady says that she's on to the fact that gals is dead easy when a feller comes spielin' ghost stories and trying to make up, and that's why she won't listen to no soft soap. She says she caught yer dead to rights, hooking a bunch of calico in the hothouse. She sidestepped in to pull some posies, and yer was squeezing the older gal to beat the band. She says it looked cute, all right, but it made her sick. She says yer better get busy and make a sneak for the train."
The young man gave a low whistle, and his eyes flashed with a sudden thought. His hand flew to the inside pocket of his coat, and drew out a handful of letters. Selecting one, he handed it to the boy, following it with a silver dollar from his vest pocket.
"Give that letter to the lady,"
he said,
"and ask her to read it. Tell her that it should explain the situation. Tell her that, if she had mingled a little trust with her conception of the ideal, much heartache might have been avoided. Tell her that the loyalty she prizes so much has never wavered. Tell her I am waiting for an answer."
The messenger stood before the lady.
"The gent says he's had de ski bunk put on him without no cause. He says he's no bum guy. And, lady, you read that letter, and I'll bet he's a white sport, all right."
The young lady unfolded the letter, somewhat doubtfully, and read it.
Dear Dr. Arnold, I want to thank you for your most kind and opportune aid to my daughter last Friday evening, when she was overcome by an attack of her old heart trouble in the conservatory at Mrs. Waldron's reception. Had you not been near to catch her as she fell and to render proper attention, we might have lost her. I would be glad if you would call and undertake the treatment of her case. Gratefully yours, Robert Ashburton.
The young lady refolded the letter and handed it to the boy.
"The gent wants an answer,"
said the messenger.
"What's the word?"
The lady's eyes suddenly flashed on him, bright, smiling, and wet.
"Tell that guy on the other bench,"
she said with a happy, tremulous laugh,
"that his girl wants him."
End of By Courier. Les Miserables, Volume 1, Book 2nd, Chapters 12 and 13, The Bishop Works, and Little Gervais, by Victor Hugo, translated by Isabel F. Hapgood. Dramatis Personae. Narrator, read by Joanna Michael Hoyt.
Madame Magloire, read by T.J. Burns.
Monseigneur Bienvenu, read by Todd.
Gendarme, read by Greg Giordano.
Jean Valjean, read by Wayne Cook.
Little Gervais, read by Jasmine Silva.
Priest, read by Larry Wilson.
The next morning at sunrise, Monseigneur Bienvenu was strolling in his garden. Madame Magloire ran up to him in utter consternation.
Monseigneur, Monseigneur,
she exclaimed.
Does your grace know where the basket of silver is?
Yes,
replied the bishop.
Ah, Jesu, the Lord be blessed,
she resumed.
I did not know what had become of it.
The bishop had just picked up the basket in a flower bed. He presented it to Madame Magloire.
Here it is.
Well,
said she.
Nothing in it. And the silver?
Ah,
returned the bishop.
So it is the silver which troubles you. I don't know where it is.
Great good God, it is stolen. The man who was here last night has stolen it.
In a twinkling, with all the vivacity of an alert old woman, Madame Magloire had rushed to the oratory, entered the alcove, and returned to the bishop. The bishop had just bent down, and was sighing as he examined a plant of Cochlearia de Guillon, which the basket had broken as it fell across the bed. He rose up at Madame Magloire's cry.
Monseigneur, the man is gone. The silver has been stolen.
As she uttered this exclamation, her eyes fell upon a corner of the garden, where traces of the wall having been scaled were visible. The coping of the wall had been torn away.
Stay! Yonder is the way that he went. He jumped over into the Cocheville lane. Ah, the abomination! He has stolen our silver.
The bishop remained silent for a moment. Then he raised his grave eyes and said gently to Madame Magloire,
And, in the first place, was that silver ours?
Madame Magloire was speechless. Another silence ensued. Then the bishop went on.
Madame Magloire, I have for a long time detained that silver wrongfully. It belonged to the poor. Who was that man? A poor man, evidently.
Alas, Jesu,
returned Madame Magloire.
It is not for my sake, nor for mademoiselle's. It makes no difference to us, but it is for the sake of Monseigneur. What is Monseigneur to eat with now?
The bishop gazed at her with an air of amazement.
Ah, come. Are there no such things as pewter forks and spoons?
Madame Magloire shrugged her shoulders.
Pewter has an odor.
Iron forks and spoons, then?
Madame Magloire made an expressive grimace.
Iron has a taste.
Very well,
said the bishop.
Wooden ones, then.
A few moments later he was breakfasting at the very table at which Jean Valjean had sat on the previous evening. As he ate his breakfast, Monseigneur Welcome remarked gaily to his sister, who said nothing, and to Madame Magloire, who was grumbling under her breath, that one really does not need either fork or spoon, even of wood, in order to dip a bit of bread in a cup of milk.
A pretty idea, truly,
said Madame Magloire to herself, as she went and came.
To take in a man like that, and to lodge him close to oneself? And how fortunate that he did nothing but steal? Ah, mon Dieu! It makes one shudder to think of it.
As the brother and sister were about to rise from the table, there came a knock at the door.
Come in,
said the bishop. The door opened. A singular and violent group made its appearance on the threshold. 3 men were holding a 4th man by the collar. The 3 men were gendarmes. The other was Jean Valjean. A brigadier of gendarmes, who seemed to be in command of the group, was standing near the door. He entered and advanced to the bishop, making a military salute.
Monseigneur,
said he. At this word Jean Valjean, who was dejected and seemed overwhelmed, raised his head with an air of stupefaction.
Monseigneur,
he murmured.
So he is not the curé?
Silence,
said the gendarme.
Is he Monseigneur the bishop?
In the meantime, Monseigneur Bienvenu had advanced as quickly as his great age permitted.
Ah, here you are,
he exclaimed, looking at Jean Valjean.
I am glad to see you. But how is this? I gave you the candlesticks, too, which are of silver like the rest, and for which you can certainly get 200 francs. Why did you not carry them away with your forks and spoons?
Jean Valjean opened his eyes wide, and stared at the venerable bishop with an expression which no human tongue can render any account of.
Monseigneur,
said the brigadier of gendarmes.
So what this man said is true, then? We came across him. He was walking like a man who was running away. We stopped him to look into the matter. He had this silver—
And he told you,
interposed the bishop with a smile,
that it had been given to him by a kind old fellow of a priest with whom he had passed the night? I see how the matter stands. And you have brought him back here? It is a mistake.
In that case,
replied the brigadier,
we can let him go?
Certainly,
replied the bishop. The gendarmes released Jean Valjean, who recoiled.
Is it true I am to be released?
He said in an almost inarticulate voice, and as though he were talking in his sleep.
Yes, thou art released. Dost thou not understand?
Said one of the gendarmes.
My friend,
resumed the bishop,
before you go, here are your candlesticks. Take them.
He stepped to the chimney-piece, took the 2 silver candlesticks, and brought them to Jean Valjean. The 2 women looked on without uttering a word, without a gesture, without a look which could disconcert the bishop. Jean Valjean was trembling in every limb. He took the 2 candlesticks mechanically, and with a bewildered air.
Now,
said the bishop,
go in peace. By the way, when you return, my friend, it is not necessary to pass through the garden. You can always enter and depart through the street door. It is never fastened with anything but a latch, either by day or by night.
Then, turning to the gendarmes,
you may retire, gentlemen.
The gendarmes retired. Jean Valjean was like a man on the point of fainting. The bishop drew near to him and said in a low voice,
Do not forget, never forget, that you have promised to use this money in becoming an honest man.
Jean Valjean, who had no recollection of ever having promised anything, remained speechless. The bishop had emphasized the words when he uttered them. He resumed with solemnity,
Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil, but to good. It is your soul that I buy from you. I withdraw it from black thoughts and the spirit of perdition, and I give it to God.
Jean Valjean left the town as though he were fleeing from it. He set out at a very hasty pace through the fields, taking whatever roads and paths presented themselves to him, without perceiving that he was incessantly retracing his steps. He wandered thus the whole morning, without having eaten anything, and without feeling hungry. He was the prey of a throng of novel sensations. He was conscious of a sort of rage. He did not know against whom it was directed. He could not have told whether he was touched or humiliated. There came over him at moments a strange emotion which he resisted, and to which he opposed the hardness acquired during the last 20 years of his life. This state of mind fatigued him. He perceived with dismay that the sort of frightful calm which the injustice of his misfortune had conferred upon him was giving way within him. He asked himself what would replace this. At times he would have actually preferred to be in prison with the gendarmes, and that things should not have happened in this way. It would have agitated him less. Although the season was tolerably far advanced, there were still a few late flowers in the hedgerows here and there, whose odour as he passed through them in his march recalled to him memories of his childhood. These memories were almost intolerable to him. It was so long since they had recurred to him. Unutterable thoughts assembled within him in this manner all day long. As the sun declined to its setting, casting long shadows athwart the soil from every pebble, Jean Valjean sat down behind a bush upon a large ruddy plain, which was absolutely deserted. There was nothing on the horizon except the Alps, not even the spire of a distant village. Jean Valjean might have been 3 leagues distant from D. A path which intersected the plain passed a few paces from the bush. In the middle of this meditation, which would have contributed not a little to render his rags terrifying to anyone who might have encountered him, a joyous sound became audible. He turned his head and saw a little Savoyard, about 10 years of age, coming up the path and singing, his hurdy-gurdy on his hip, and his marmot-box on his back. One of those gay and gentle children who go from land to land affording a view of their knees through the holes in their trousers. Without stopping his song, the lad halted in his march from time to time, and played at knucklebones with some coins which he had in his hand, his whole fortune probably. Among this money there was 1 40-sou piece. The child halted beside the bush, without perceiving Jean Valjean, and tossed up his handful of sous, which up to that time he had caught with a good deal of adroitness on the back of his hand. This time the 40-sou piece escaped him, and went rolling toward the brushwood until it reached Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean set his foot upon it. In the meantime the child had looked after his coin and had caught sight of him. He showed no astonishment, but walked straight up to the man. The spot was absolutely solitary. As far as the eye could see there was not a person on the plain or on the path. The only sound was the tiny, feeble cries of a flock of birds of passage, which was traversing the heavens at an immense height. The child was standing with his back to the sun, which cast threads of gold in his hair, and empurpled with its blood-red gleam the savage face of Jean Valjean.
"Sir,"
said the little Savoyard, with that childish confidence which is composed of ignorance and innocence.
"My money."
What is your name?
Said Jean Valjean.
"Little Gervais, sir."
Go away,
said Jean Valjean.
"Sir,"
resumed the child,
"give me back my money."
Jean Valjean dropped his head and made no reply. The child began again.
"My money, sir."
Jean Valjean's eyes remained fixed on the earth.
"My piece of money?"
cried the child.
"My white piece, my silver."
It seemed as though Jean Valjean did not hear him. The child grasped him by the collar of his blouse and shook him. At the same time he made an effort to displace the big iron-shod shoe which rested on his treasure.
"I want my piece of money, my piece of 40 sous."
The child wept. Jean Valjean raised his head. He still remained seated. His eyes were troubled. He gazed at the child in a sort of amazement. Then he stretched out his hand towards his cudgel and cried in a terrible voice,
"Who's there?"
"I, sir,"
replied the child.
"Little Gervais, give me back my 40 sous, if you please. Take your foot away, sir, if you please."
Then, irritated though he was so small, and becoming almost menacing,
"Come now, will you take your foot away? Take your foot away, or we'll see."
It is still you,
said Jean Valjean, And rising abruptly to his feet, his foot still resting on the silver piece, he added,
"Will you take yourself off?"
The frightened child looked at him, then began to tremble from head to foot, and after a few moments of stupor he set out, running at the top of his speed, without daring to turn his neck or to utter a cry. Nevertheless, lack of breath forced him to halt after a certain distance, and Jean Valjean heard him sobbing in the midst of his own reverie. At the end of a few moments the child had disappeared. The sun had set. The shadows were descending around Jean Valjean. He had eaten nothing all day. It is probable that he was feverish. He had remained standing, and had not changed his attitude after the child's flight. The breath heaved his chest at long and irregular intervals. His gaze, fixed 10 or 12 paces in front of him, seemed to be scrutinizing with profound attention the shape of an ancient fragment of blue earthenware which had fallen in the grass. All at once he shivered. He had just begun to feel the chill of evening. He settled his cap more firmly on his brow, sought mechanically to cross and button his blouse, advanced a step, and stopped to pick up his cudgel. At that moment he caught sight of the 40-sou piece, which his foot had half ground into the earth, and which was shining among the pebbles. It was as though he had received a galvanic shock.
"What is this?"
he muttered between his teeth. He recoiled 3 paces, then halted, without being able to detach his gaze from the spot which his foot had trodden but an instant before, as though the thing which lay glittering there in the gloom had been an open eye riveted upon him. At the expiration of a few moments he darted convulsively towards the silver coin, seized it, and straightened himself up again, and began to gaze afar off over the plain, at the same time casting his eyes towards all points of the horizon, as he stood there erect and shivering, like a terrified wild animal which is seeking refuge. He saw nothing. Night was falling. The plain was cold and vague. Great banks of violet haze were rising in the gleam of the twilight. He said,
"Ah,"
and set out rapidly in the direction in which the child had disappeared. After about 30 paces he paused, looked about him, and saw nothing. Then he shouted with all his might,
"Little Gervais! Little Gervais!"
He paused and waited. There was no reply. The landscape was gloomy and deserted. He was encompassed by space. There was nothing around him but an obscurity in which his gaze was lost, and a silence which engulfed his voice. An icy north wind was blowing, and imparted to things around him a sort of lugubrious life. The bushes shook their thin little arms with incredible fury. One would have said that they were threatening and pursuing someone. He set out on his march again. Then he began to run, and from time to time he halted and shouted into that solitude, with a voice which was the most formidable and the most disconsolate that it was possible to hear.
"Little Gervais! Little Gervais!"
Assuredly, if the child had heard him, he would have been alarmed, and would have taken good care not to show himself. But the child was no doubt already far away. He encountered a priest on horseback. He stepped up to him and said,
"Monsieur le Curé, have you seen the child pass?"
"No,"
said the priest.
"One named Little Gervais?"
"I have seen no one."
He drew 2 5-franc pieces from his money-bag and handed them to the priest.
"Monsieur le Curé, this is for your poor people. Monsieur le Curé, he was a little lad about 10 years old, was a marmot, I think, and a hurdy-gurdy, one of those Savoyards, you know."
"I have not seen him."
"Little Gervais, there are no villages here. Can you tell me?"
"If he is like what you say, my friend, he is a little stranger. Such persons pass through these parts. We know nothing of them."
Jean Valjean seized 2 more coins of 5 francs each with violence, and gave them to the priest.
"For your poor,"
he said. Then he added wildly,
"Monseigneur l'Abbé, have me arrested. I am a thief."
The priest put spurs to his horse and fled in haste, much alarmed. Jean Valjean set out on a run, in the direction which he had first taken. In this way he traversed a tolerably long distance, gazing, calling, shouting, but he met no one. 2 or 3 times he ran across the plain towards something which conveyed to him the effect of a human being reclining or crouching down. It turned out to be nothing but brushwood, or rocks nearly on a level with the earth. At length, at a spot where 3 paths intersected each other, he stopped. The moon had risen. He sent his gaze into the distance and shouted for the last time,
"Little Gervais, Little Gervais! Little Gervais!
His shout died away in the mist without even awakening an echo. He murmured yet once more,
Little Gervais!
But in a feeble and almost inarticulate voice. It was his last effort. His legs gave way abruptly under him, as though an invisible power had suddenly overwhelmed him with the weight of his evil conscience. He fell exhausted on a large stone, his fists clenched in his hair and his face on his knees, and he cried,
I am a wretch.
Then his heart burst, and he began to cry. It was the first time that he had wept in 19 years. When Jean Valjean left the bishop's house he was, as we have seen, quite thrown out of everything that had been his thought hitherto. He could not yield to the evidence of what was going on within him. He hardened himself against the angelic action and the gentle words of the old man.
You have promised me to become an honest man. I buy your soul. I take it away from the spirit of perversity. I give it to the good God.
This recurred to his mind unceasingly. To this celestial kindness he opposed pride, which is the fortress of evil within us. He was indistinctly conscious that the pardon of this priest was the greatest assault and the most formidable attack which had moved him yet, that his obduracy was finally settled if he resisted this clemency, that if he yielded, he should be obliged to renounce that hatred with which the actions of other men had filled his soul through so many years, and which pleased him, that this time it was necessary to conquer or to be conquered, and that a struggle, a colossal and final struggle, had been begun between his viciousness and the goodness of that man. In the presence of these lights, he proceeded like a man who is intoxicated. As he walked thus with haggard eyes, did he have a distinct perception of what might result to him from his adventure at D? Did he understand all those mysterious murmurs which warn or importune the spirit at certain moments of life? Did a voice whisper in his ear that he had just passed the solemn hour of his destiny, that there no longer remained a middle course for him, that if he were not henceforth the best of men, he would be the worst, that it behooved him now, so to speak, to mount higher than the bishop, or fall lower than the convict, that if he wished to become good he must become an angel, that if he wished to remain evil he must become a monster? Here again some questions must be put which we have already put to ourselves elsewhere. Did he catch some shadow of all this in his thought, in a confused way? Misfortune certainly, as we have said, does form the education of the intelligence. Nevertheless, it is doubtful whether Jean Valjean was in a condition to disentangle all that we have here indicated. If these ideas occurred to him, he but caught glimpses of, rather than saw them, and they only succeeded in throwing him into an unutterable and almost painful state of emotion. On emerging from that black and deformed thing which is called the galleys, the bishop had hurt his soul, as too vivid a light would have hurt his eyes on emerging from the dark. The future life, the possible life which offered itself to him henceforth, all pure and radiant, filled him with tremors and anxiety. He no longer knew where he really was. Like an owl who should suddenly see the sun rise, the convict had been dazzled and blinded, as it were, by virtue. That which was certain, that which he did not doubt, was that he was no longer the same man, that everything about him was changed, that it was no longer in his power to make it as though the bishop had not spoken to him, and had not touched him. In this state of mind he had encountered little Gervais, and had robbed him of his 40 sous. Why? He certainly could not have explained it. Was this the last effect and the supreme effort, as it were, of the evil thoughts which he had brought away from the galleys, a remnant of impulse, a result of what is called in statics acquired force? It was that, and it was also perhaps even less than that. Let us say it simply. It was not he who stole, it was not the man, it was the beast, who, by habit and instinct, had simply placed his foot upon that money, while the intelligence was struggling amid so many novel and hitherto unheard of thoughts besetting it. When intelligence reawakened and beheld that action of the brute, Jean Valjean recoiled with anguish and uttered a cry of terror. It was because, strange phenomenon, and one which was possible only in the situation in which he found himself, in stealing the money from that child, he had done a thing of which he was no longer capable. However that may be, this last evil action had a decisive effect on him. It abruptly traversed that chaos which he bore in his mind, and dispersed it, placed on one side the thick obscurity, and on the other the light, and acted on his soul, in the state in which it then was, as certain chemical reagents act upon a troubled mixture, by precipitating one element and clarifying the other. First of all, even before examining himself and reflecting, all bewildered, like one who seeks to save himself, he tried to find the child in order to return his money to him. Then, when he recognized the fact that this was impossible, he halted in despair. At the moment when he exclaimed, "I am a wretch," he had just perceived what he was, and he was already separated from himself to such a degree that he seemed to himself to be no longer anything more than a phantom, and as if he had, there before him in flesh and blood, the hideous galley convict, Jean Valjean, cudgel in hand, his blouse on his hips, his knapsack filled with stolen objects on his back, with his resolute and gloomy visage, with his thoughts filled with abominable projects. Excess of unhappiness had, as we have remarked, made him in some sort a visionary. This, then, was in the nature of a vision. He actually saw that Jean Valjean, that sinister face, before him. He had almost reached the point of asking himself who that man was, and he was horrified by him. His brain was going through one of those violent, and yet perfectly calm, moments in which reverie is so profound that it absorbs reality. One no longer beholds the object which one has before one, and one sees, as though apart from one's self, the figures which one has in one's own mind. Thus he contemplated himself, so to speak, face to face, and at the same time, athwart this hallucination, he perceived in a mysterious depth a sort of light, which he at first took for a torch. On scrutinizing this light, which appeared to his conscience with more attention, he recognized the fact that it possessed a human form, and that this torch was the bishop. His conscience weighed in turn these two men thus placed before it, the bishop and Jean Valjean. Nothing less than the first was required to soften the second. By one of those singular effects, which are peculiar to this sort of ecstasies, in proportion as his reverie continued, as the bishop grew great and resplendent in his eyes, so did Jean Valjean grow less and vanish. After a certain time he was no longer anything more than a shade. All at once he disappeared. The bishop alone remained. He filled the whole soul of this wretched man with a magnificent radiance. Jean Valjean wept for a long time. He wept burning tears. He sobbed with more weakness than a woman, with more fright than a child. As he wept, daylight penetrated more and more clearly into his soul, an extraordinary light, a light at once ravishing and terrible. His past life, his first fault, his long expiation, his external brutishness, his internal hardness, his dismissal to liberty, rejoicing in manifold plans of vengeance, what had happened to him at the bishop's, the last thing that he had done, that theft of 40 sous from a child, a crime all the more cowardly and all the more monstrous, since it had come after the bishop's pardon. All this recurred to his mind and appeared clearly to him, but with a clearness which he had never hitherto witnessed. He examined his life, and it seemed horrible to him, his soul, and it seemed frightful to him. In the meantime a gentle light rested over this life and this soul. It seemed to him that he beheld Satan by the light of paradise. How many hours did he weep thus? What did he do after he had wept? Whither did he go? No one ever knew. The only thing which seems to be authenticated is that same night the carrier who served Grenoble at that epoch, and who arrived at D about 3 o'clock in the morning, saw, as he traversed the street in which the bishop's residence was situated, a man in the attitude of prayer, kneeling on the pavement in the shadow, in front of the door of Monseigneur Welcome. End of chapters 12 and 13 of Les Miserables, by Victor Hugo.
The Kiss from the Awakening, and selected short stories by Kate Chopin. Narrator read by Michelle Eaton.
Barenton, read by Todd.
Harvey, read by Greg Giordano.
Natalie, read by Matea Bracic.
The Kiss. It was still quite light out of doors, but inside, with the curtains drawn and the smouldering fire sending out a dim, uncertain glow, the room was full of deep shadows. Brantain sat in one of these shadows. It had overtaken him, and he did not mind. The obscurity lent him courage to keep his eyes fastened as ardently as he liked upon the girl who had sat in the firelight. She was very handsome, with a certain fine, rich colouring that belongs to the healthy brunette type. She was quite composed as she idly stroked the satiny coat of the cat that lay curled in her lap, and she occasionally sent a slow glance into the shadow where her companion sat. They were talking low of indifferent things, which plainly were not the things that occupied their thoughts. She knew that he loved her, a frank, blustering fellow without guile enough to conceal his feelings, and no desire to do so. For 2 weeks past he had sought her society eagerly and persistently. She was confidently waiting for him to declare himself, and she meant to accept him. The rather insignificant and unattractive Brantain was enormously rich, and she liked and required the entourage which wealth could give her. During one of the pauses between their talk of the last tea and the next reception, the door opened and a young man entered, whom Brantain knew quite well. The girl turned her face toward him. A stride or two brought him to her side, and bending over her chair, before she could suspect his intention, for she did not realise that he had not seen her visitor, he pressed an ardent, lingering kiss upon her lips. Brantain slowly arose. So did the girl arise, but quickly, and the newcomer stood between them, a little amusement and some defiance struggling with the confusion in his face.
"I believe,"
stammered Brantain.
"I see that I have stayed too long. I had no idea. That is, I must wish you good-bye."
He was clutching his hat with both hands, and probably did not perceive that she was extending her hand to him. Her presence of mind had not completely deserted her, but she could not have trusted herself to speak.
"Hang me if I saw him sitting there, Natty. I know it's deuced awkward for you, but I hope you'll forgive me this once, this very first break. Why, what's the matter?"
Don't touch me. Don't come near me,
she returned angrily.
What do you mean by entering the house without ringing?
"I came in with your brother, as I often do,"
he answered coldly, in self-justification.
"We came in the side way. He went upstairs, and I came in here, hoping to find you. The explanation is simple enough, and ought to satisfy you that the misadventure was unavoidable. But do say that you forgive me, Natalie,"
he entreated, softening.
Forgive you? You don't know what you are talking about. Let me pass. It depends upon a good deal whether I ever forgive you.
At that next reception, which she and Brantain had been talking about, she approached the young man with a delicious frankness of manner when she saw him there.
Will you let me speak to you a moment or two, Mr. Brantain?
she asked, with an engaging but perturbed smile. He seemed extremely unhappy, but when she took his arm and walked away with him, seeking a retired corner, a ray of hope mingled with the almost comical misery of his expression. She was apparently very outspoken.
Perhaps I should not have sought this interview, Mr. Brantain, but oh, I have been very uncomfortable, almost miserable since that little encounter the other afternoon, when I thought how you might have misinterpreted it and believed things.
Hope was plainly gaining the ascendancy over misery in Brantain's round, guileless face.
Of course I know it is nothing to you, but for my own sake I do want you to understand that Mr. Harvey is an intimate friend of long standing. Why, we have always been like cousins, like brother and sister, I may say. He is my brother's most intimate associate, and often fancies that he is entitled to the same privileges as the family. Oh, I know it is absurd, uncalled for, to tell you this, undignified even.
She was almost weeping.
But it makes so much difference to me what you think of me.
Her voice had grown very low and agitated. The misery had all disappeared from Brantain's face.
Then you really do care what I think, Miss Natalie? May I call you Miss Natalie?
They turned into a long, dim corridor that was lined on either side with tall, graceful plants. They walked slowly to the very end of it. When they turned to retrace their steps, Brantain's face was radiant and hers was triumphant. Harvey was among the guests at the wedding, and he sought her out in a rare moment when she stood alone.
"Your husband,"
he said, smiling,
"has sent me over to kiss you."
A quick blush suffused her face and round polished throat.
"I suppose it's natural for a man to feel and act generously on an occasion of this kind. He tells me he doesn't want his marriage to interrupt wholly that pleasant intimacy which has existed between you and me. I don't know what you've been telling him."
With an insolent smile.
"But he has sent me here to kiss you."
She felt like a chess player who, by the clever handling of his pieces, sees the game taking the course intended. Her eyes were bright and tender with a smile as they glanced upon his, and her lips looked hungry for the kiss which they invited.
"But you know,"
he went on quietly.
"I didn't tell him so. It would have seemed ungrateful. But I can tell you, I've stopped kissing women. It's dangerous."
Well, she had Brantain and his million left. A person can't have everything in this world, and it was a little unreasonable of her to expect it. End of The Kiss, from The Awakening and Selected Short Stories by Kate Chopin.
The Innocence of Father Brown, Chapter 10 by G.K. Chesterton. The Eye of Apollo.
Father Brown, read by Wayne Cook. Flambeau, read by Wayne Cook.
Kalon the Prophet, read by Greg Giordano.
Miss Joan Stacey, read by Therese Lindholm.
Miss Pauline Stacey, read by Lynette Calkins.
Narrated by Mozart Jr. That singular smoky sparkle, at once a confusion and a transparency, which is the strange secret of the Thames, was changing more and more from its grey to its glittering extreme as the sun climbed to the zenith over Westminster, and two men crossed Westminster Bridge. One man was very tall, and the other very short. They might even have been fantastically compared to the arrogant clock tower of Parliament, and the humbler humped shoulders of the Abbey, for the short man was in clerical dress. The official description of the tall man was Monsieur Hercule Flambeau, private detective, and he was going to his new offices in a new pile of flats facing the Abbey entrance. The official description of the short man was the Reverend J. Brown, attached to St. Francis Xavier's Church, Camberwell, and he was going from a Camberwell deathbed to see the new offices of his friend. The building was American in its skyscraping altitude, and American also in the oiled elaboration of its machinery of telephones and lifts. But it was barely finished and still understaffed. Only 3 tenants had moved in. The office just above Flambeau was occupied, as also was the office just below him. The 2 floors above that and the 3 floors below were entirely bare. But the first glance at the new tower of flats caught something much more arresting. Save for a few relics of scaffolding, the one glaring object was erected outside the office just above Flambeau's. It was an enormous gilt effigy of the human eye, surrounded with rays of gold, and taking up as much room as 2 or 3 of the office windows.
"What on earth is that?"
asked Father Brown, and stood still.
"Oh, a new religion,"
said Flambeau, laughing.
"One of those new religions that forgive your sins by saying you never had any, or rather like Christian Science, I should think. The fact is that a fellow calling himself Kalon, I don't know what his name is, except it can't be that, has taken the flat just above me. I have 2 lady typewriters underneath me, and this enthusiastic old humbug on top. He calls himself the new priest of Apollo, and he worships the sun.
Let him look out,
said Father Brown.
The sun was the cruelest of all the gods. But what does that monstrous eye mean?
As I understand it, it is a theory of theirs,
answered Flambeau,
that a man can endure anything if his mind is quite steady. There are 2 great symbols, the sun and the open eye. For they say if a man were really healthy, he could stare at the sun.
If a man were really healthy,
said Father Brown,
he would not bother to stare at it.
Well, that's all I can tell you about the no religion,
went on Flambeau carelessly.
It claims, of course, that it can cure all physical diseases.
Can it cure the one spiritual disease?
Asked Father Brown with a serious curiosity.
And what is the one spiritual disease?
Asked Flambeau, smiling.
Oh, thinking one is quite well,
said his friend. Flambeau was much more interested in the quiet little office below him than in the flamboyant temple above. He was a lucid Southerner, incapable of conceiving himself as anything but a Catholic or an atheist, and new religions of a bright and pallid sort were not much in his line. But humanity was always in his line, especially when it was good-looking. Moreover, the ladies downstairs were characters in their way. The office was kept by 2 sisters, both slight and dark, one of them tall and striking. She had a dark, eager, and aquiline profile, and was one of those women whom one always thinks of in profile, as of the clean-cut edge of some weapon. She seemed to cleave her way through life. She had eyes of startling brilliancy, but it was the brilliancy of steel rather than of diamonds, and her straight, slim figure was a shade too stiff for its grace. Her younger sister was like her shortened shadow, a little grayer, paler, and more insignificant. They both wore business-like black, with little masculine cuffs and collars. There are thousands of such curt, strenuous ladies in the offices of London, but the interest of these lay rather in their real than their apparent position. For Pauline Stacey, the elder, was actually the heiress of a crest and half a county, as well as great wealth. She had been brought up in castles and gardens before a frigid fierceness, peculiar to the modern woman, had driven her to what she considered a harsher and a higher existence. She had not, indeed, surrendered her money. In that there would have been a romantic or monkish abandon, quite alien to her masterful utilitarianism. She held her wealth, she would say, for use upon practical social objects. Part of it she had put into her business, the nucleus of a model typewriting emporium. Part of it was distributed in various leagues and cases for the advancement of such work among women. How far Joan, her sister and partner, shared this slightly prosaic idealism, no one could be sure. But she followed her leader with a dog-like affection, which was somehow more attractive, with its touch of tragedy, than the hard, high spirits of the elder. For Pauline Stacey had nothing to say to tragedy. She was understood to deny its existence. Her rigid rapidity and cold impatience had amused Flambeau very much on the first occasion of his entering the flats. He had lingered outside the lift in the entrance hall waiting for the lift boy, who generally conducts strangers to the various floors. But this bright-eyed falcon of a girl had openly refused to endure such official delay. She said sharply that she knew all about the lift, and was not dependent on boys or men either. Though her flat was only 3 floors above, she managed in the few seconds of ascent to give Flambeau a great many of her fundamental views in an offhand manner. They were to the general effect that she was a modern working woman, and loved modern working machinery. Her bright black eyes blazed with abstract anger against those who rebuke mechanic science and ask for the return of romance. Everyone, she said, ought to be able to manage machines, just as she could manage the lift. She seemed almost to resent the fact of Flambeau opening the lift door for her, and that gentleman went up to his own apartments, smiling with somewhat mingled feelings at the memory of such spitfire self-dependence. She certainly had a temper of a snappy, practical sort. The gestures of her thin, elegant hands were abrupt or even destructive. Once Flambeau entered her office on some typewriting business, and found she had just flung a pair of spectacles belonging to her sister into the middle of the floor and stamped on them. She was already in the rapids of an ethical tirade against the sickly medical notions, and the morbid admission of weakness implied in such an apparatus. She dared her sister to bring such artificial, unhealthy rubbish into the place again. She asked if she was expected to wear wooden legs or false hair or glass eyes, and as she spoke her eyes sparkled like the terrible crystal. Flambeau, quite bewildered with this fanaticism, could not refrain from asking Miss Pauline with direct French logic why a pair of spectacles was a more morbid sign of weakness than a lift, and why, if science might help us in the one effort, it might not help us in the other.
"That is so different,"
said Pauline Stacy loftily.
"Batteries and motors and all those things are marks of the force of man, yes, Mr. Flambeau, and the force of woman, too. We shall take our turn at these great engines that devour distance and defy time. That is high and splendid. That is really science. But these nasty props and plasters the doctors sell, why, they are just badges of poltroonery. Doctors stick on legs and arms as if we were born cripples and sick slaves. But I was free-born, Mr. Flambeau. People only think they need these things because they have been trained in fear instead of being trained in power and courage, just as the silly nurses tell children not to stare at the sun, and so they can't do it without blinking. But why among the stars should there be one star I may not see? The sun is not my master, and I will open my eyes and stare at him whenever I choose."
"Your eyes,"
said Flambeau with a foreign bow,
"will dazzle the sun."
He took pleasure in complimenting this strange, stiff beauty, partly because it threw her a little off her balance. But as he went upstairs to his floor, he drew a deep breath and whistled, saying to himself,
"So she has got into the hands of that conjuror upstairs with his golden eye."
For, little as he knew or cared about the new religion of Calonne, he had heard of his special notion about sun-gazing. He soon discovered that the spiritual bond between the floors above and below him was close and increasing. The man who called himself Calonne was a magnificent creature, worthy in a physical sense to be the pontiff of Apollo. He was nearly as tall even as Flambeau, and very much better looking, with a golden beard, strong blue eyes, and a mane flung back like a lion's. In structure, he was the blonde beast of Nietzsche, but all this animal beauty was heightened, brightened, and softened by genuine intellect and spirituality. If he looked like one of the great Saxon kings, he looked like one of the kings that were also saints. And this despite the cockney incongruity of his surroundings. The fact that he had had an office halfway up a building in Victoria Street, that the clerk, a commonplace youth in cuffs and collars, sat in the outer room between him and the corridor, that his name was on a brass plate, and this gilt emblem of his creed hung above his street like the advertisement of an oculist. All this vulgarity could not take away from the man called Calonne, with the vivid oppression and inspiration that came from his soul and body. When all was said, a man in the presence of this quack did feel in the presence of a great man. Even in the loose jacket suit of linen that he wore as a workshop dress in his office, he was a fascinating and formidable figure, and when robed in the white vestments and crowned with the golden circlet in which he daily saluted the sun, he really looked so splendid that the laughter of the street people sometimes died suddenly on their lips. For 3 times in the day the new sun-worshipper went out on his little balcony, in the face of all Westminster, to say some litany to his shining lord, once at daybreak, once at sunset, and once at the shock of noon. And it was well the shock of noon still shook faintly from the towers of Parliament and parish church, that Father Brown, the friend of Flambeau, first looked up and saw the white priest of Apollo. Flambeau had seen quite enough of these daily salutations of Phoebus, and plunged into the porch of the tall building without even looking for his clerical friend to follow. But Father Brown, whether from a professional interest in ritual, or a strong individual interest in tomfoolery, stopped and stared up at the balcony of the sun-worshipper, just as he might have stopped and stared up at a Punch and Judy. Calonne the prophet was already erect, with argent garments and uplifted hands, and the sound of his strangely penetrating voice could be heard all the way down the busy street, uttering his solar litany. He was already in the middle of it, His eyes were fixed upon the flaming disk. It is doubtful if he saw anything or anyone on this earth. It is substantially certain that he did not see a stunted, round-faced priest, who, in the crowd below, looked up at him with blinking eyes. That was perhaps the most startling difference between even these two far-divided men. Father Brown could not look at anything without blinking, but the priest of Apollo could look on the blaze at noon without a quiver of the eyelid.
"O sun!"
cried the prophet.
"O star that art too great to be allowed among the stars! O fountain that flowest quietly in that secret spot that is called space! White Father of all white unwearied things, white flames and white flowers and white peaks! Father, who art more innocent than all thy most innocent and quiet children, primal purity, into the peace of which—"
A rush and crash like the reversed rush of a rocket was cloven with a strident and incessant yelling. 5 people rushed into the gate of the mansions, as 3 people rushed out, and for an instant they all deafened each other. The sense of some utterly abrupt horror seemed for a moment to fill half the street with bad news. Bad news that was all the worse because no one knew what it was. 2 figures remained still after the crash of commotion. The fair priest of Apollo on the balcony above, and the ugly priest of Christ below him. At last the tall figure and titanic energy of Flambeau appeared in the doorway of the mansions, and dominated the little mob. Talking at the top of his voice like a foghorn, he told somebody or anybody to go for a surgeon, and as he turned back into the dark and thronged entrance, his friend Father Brown dipped in insignificantly after him. Even as he ducked and dived through the crowd, he could still hear the magnificent melody and monotony of the solar priest still calling on the happy God who is the friend of fountains and flowers. Father Brown found Flambeau and some 6 other people standing round the enclosed space into which the lift commonly descended. But the lift had not descended. Something else had descended, something that ought to have come by a lift. For the last 4 minutes, Flambeau had looked down on it, had seen the brained and bleeding figure of that beautiful woman who denied the existence of tragedy. He had never had the slightest doubt that it was Pauline Stacy, and though he had sent for a doctor, he had not the slightest doubt that she was dead. He could not remember for certain whether he had liked her or disliked her. There was so much both to like and dislike. But she had been a person to him, and the unbearable pathos of details and habits stabbed him with all the small daggers of bereavement. He remembered her pretty face and priggish speeches with a sudden secret vividness which is all the bitterness of death. In an instant, like a bolt from the blue, like a thunderbolt from nowhere, that beautiful and defiant body had been dashed down the open well of the lift to death at the bottom. Was it suicide? With so insolent an optimist it seemed impossible. Was it murder? But who was there in those hardly inhabited flats to murder anybody? In a rush of raucous words, which he meant to be strong and suddenly found weak, he asked where was that fellow Kalon. A voice, habitually heavy, quiet, and full, assured him that Kalon for the last 15 minutes had been away up on his balcony, worshipping his god. When Flambeau heard the voice, and felt the hand of Father Brown, he turned his swarthy face and said abruptly,
"Then if he has been up there all the time, who could have done it?"
"Perhaps,"
said the other.
"we might go upstairs and find out. We have half an hour before the police will move."
Leaving the body of the slain heiress in charge of the surgeons, Flambeau dashed up the stairs to the typewriting office, found it utterly empty, and then dashed up to his own. Having entered that, he abruptly returned with a new and white face to his friend.
"Your sister,"
he said with an unpleasant seriousness.
"Sister seems to have gone out for a walk."
Father Brown nodded.
"Or she may have gone up to the office of that Sun man,"
he said.
"If I were you, I should just verify that, and let us talk it over in your office. No,"
he added suddenly, as if remembering something.
"Shall I ever get over that stupidity of mine? Of course, in their office downstairs."
Flambeau stared, but he followed the little father downstairs to the empty flat of the Stacys, where that impenetrable pastor took a large red leather chair in the very entrance, from which he could see the stairs and landings, and waited. He did not wait very long. In about 4 minutes 3 figures descended the stairs, alike only in their solemnity. The first was Joan Stacy, the sister of the dead woman. Evidently she had been upstairs in the temporary temple of Apollo. The second was the priest of Apollo himself, his litany finished, sweeping down the empty stairs in utter magnificence. Something in his white robes, beard, and parted hair had the look of Doré's Christ leaving the praetorium. The third was Flambeau, black-browed and somewhat bewildered. Miss Joan Stacy, dark, with a drawn face and hair prematurely touched with gray, walked straight to her own desk and set out her papers with a practical flap. The mere action rallied everyone else to sanity. If Miss Joan Stacy was a criminal, she was a cool one. Father Brown regarded her for some time with an odd little smile, and then, without taking his eyes off her, addressed himself to somebody else.
"Prophet,"
he said, presumably addressing Kalon,
"I wish you would tell me a lot about your religion."
"I shall be proud to do it,"
said Kalon, inclining his still crowned head.
"but I am not sure that I understand."
"Why, it's like this,"
said Father Brown in his frankly doubtful way.
"We're taught that if a man has really bad first principles, that must be partly his fault. But for all that, we can make some difference between a man who insults his quite clear conscience and a man with a conscience more or less clouded with sophistries. Now, do you really think that murder is wrong at all?"
"Is this an accusation?"
asked Kalon very quietly.
"No,"
answered Brown, equally gently.
"It is a speech for the defense."
In the long and startled stillness of the room the prophet of Apollo slowly rose, and really it was like the rising of the sun. He filled that room with his light and life in such a manner that a man felt he could as easily have filled Salisbury Plain. His robed form seemed to hang the whole room with classic draperies. His epic gesture seemed to extend it into grander perspectives, till the little black figure of the modern cleric seemed to be a fault and an intrusion, a round black dot upon some splendor of Hellas.
"We meet at last, Caiaphas,"
said the prophet.
"Your church and mine are the only realities on this earth. I adore the sun, and you the darkening of the sun. You are the priest of the dying, and I of the living God. Your present work of suspicion and slander is worthy of your coat and creed. All your church is but a black police. You are only spies and detectives seeking to tear from men confessions of guilt, whether by treachery or torture. You would convict men of crime. I would convict them of innocence. You would convince them of sin. I would convince them of virtue. Reader of the books of evil, one more word before I blow away your baseless nightmares forever. Not even faintly could you understand how little I care whether you can convict me or no. The things you call disgrace and horrible hanging are to me no more than an ogre in a child's toy book to a man once grown up. You said you were offering the speech for the defense. I care so little for the cloudland of this life that I will offer you the speech for the prosecution. There is but one thing that can be said against me in this matter, and I will say it myself. The woman that is dead was my love and my bride, not after such manner as your tin chapels call lawful, but by a law purer and sterner than you will ever understand. She and I walked another world from yours, and trod palaces of crystal, while you were plodding through tunnels and corridors of brick. Well, I know that policemen, theological and otherwise, always fancy that where there has been love, there must soon be hatred. So there you have the first point made for the prosecution. But the second point is stronger. I do not grudge it you. Not only is it true that Pauline loved me, but it is also true that this very morning, before she died, she wrote at that table a will leaving me and my new church $500,000. Come, where are the handcuffs? Do you suppose I care what foolish things you do with me? Penal servitude will only be like waiting for her at a wayside station. The gallows will only be going to her in a headlong car.
He spoke with the brain-shaking authority of an orator, and Flambeau and Joan Stacy stared at him in amazed admiration. Father Brown's face seemed to express nothing but extreme distress. He looked at the ground with one wrinkle of pain across his forehead. The prophet of the sun leaned easily against the mantelpiece and resumed.
In a few words I have put before you the whole case against me, the only possible case against me. In fewer words still, I will blow it to pieces, so that not a trace of it remains. As to whether I have committed this crime, the truth is in one sentence. I could not have committed this crime. Pauline Stacy fell from this floor to the ground at 5 minutes past 12. 100 people will go into the witness box and say that I was standing out upon the balcony of my own rooms above from just before the stroke of noon to a quarter past, the usual period of my public prayers. My clerk, a respectable youth from Clapham, with no sort of connection with me, will swear that he sat in my outer office all the morning, and that no communication passed through. He will swear that I arrived a full 10 minutes before the hour, 15 minutes before any whisper of the accident, and that I did not leave the office or the balcony all that time. No one ever had so complete an alibi. I could subpoena half Westminster. I think you had better put the handcuffs away again. The case is at an end. But last of all, that no breath of this idiotic suspicion remain in the air, I will tell you all you want to know. I believe I do know how my unhappy friend came by her death. You can, if you choose, blame me for it, or my faith and philosophy at least, but you certainly cannot lock me up. It is well known to all students of the higher truths that certain adepts and illuminati have in history attained the power of levitation, that is, of being self-sustained upon the empty air. It is but a part of that general conquest of matter which is the main element in our occult wisdom. Poor Pauline was of an impulsive and ambitious temper. I think, to tell the truth, she thought herself somewhat deeper in the mysteries than she was, and she has often said to me, as we went down in the lift together, that if one's will were strong enough, one could float down as harmlessly as a feather. I solemnly believe that in some ecstasy of noble thoughts she attempted the miracle. Her will or faith must have failed her at the crucial instant, and the lower law of matter had its horrible revenge. There is the whole story, gentlemen. Very sad, and, as you think, very presumptuous and wicked, but certainly not criminal, or in any way connected with me. In the shorthand of the police courts, you had better call it suicide. I shall always call it heroic failure for the advance of science and the slow scaling of heaven.
It was the first time Flambeau had ever seen Father Brown vanquished. He still sat looking at the ground, with a painful and corrugated brow, as if in shame. It was impossible to avoid the feeling which the prophet's winged words had fanned, that here was a sullen, professional suspector of men, overwhelmed by a prouder and purer spirit of natural liberty and health. At last he said, blinking as if in bodily distress,
"Well, if that is so, sir, you need do no more than take the testamentary paper you spoke of and go. I wonder where the poor lady left it."
It will be over there on her desk by the door, I think,
said Kalon, with that massive innocence of manner that seemed to acquit him wholly.
She told me specially she would write it this morning, and I actually saw her writing as I went up in the lift to my own room.
Was her door open then?
Asked the priest, with his eye on the corner of the matting.
Yes,
said Kalon calmly.
Ah, it has been open ever since,
said the other, and resumed his silent study of the mat.
There is a paper over here,
said the grim Miss Joan, in a somewhat singular voice. She had passed over to her sister's desk by the doorway, and was holding a sheet of blue foolscap in her hand. There was a sour smile on her face that seemed unfit for such a scene or occasion, and Flambeau looked at her with a darkening brow. Kalon the prophet stood away from the paper with that loyal unconsciousness that had carried him through, but Flambeau took it out of the lady's hand, and read it with the utmost amazement. It did, indeed, begin in the formal manner of a will, but after the words, "I give and bequeath all of which I die possessed," the writing abruptly stopped with a set of scratches, and there was no trace of the name of any legatee. Flambeau, in a wonder, handed this truncated testament to his clerical friend, who glanced at it and silently gave it to the priest of the sun. An instant afterwards that pontiff, in his splendid sweeping draperies, had crossed the room in 2 great strides, and was towering over Joan Stacy, his blue eyes standing from his head.
"What monkey tricks have you been playing here?"
he cried.
"That's not all Pauline wrote."
They were startled to hear him speak in quite a new voice, with a Yankee shrillness in it. All his grandeur and good English had fallen from him like a cloak.
That is the only thing on her desk,
said Joan, and confronted him steadily with the same smile of evil favor. Of a sudden the man broke out into blasphemies and cataracts of incredulous words. There was something shocking about the dropping of his mask. It was like a man's real face falling off.
"See here,"
he cried in broad American, when he was breathless with cursing.
"I may be an adventurer, but I guess you're a murderess. Yes, gentlemen, here's your death explained, and without any levitation. The poor girl is writing a will in my favor. Her cursed sister comes in, struggles for the pen, drags her to the well, and throws her down before she can finish it. Sakes, I reckon we want the handcuffs after all."
"As you have truly remarked,"
replied Joan with ugly calm,
"your clerk is a very respectable young man, who knows the nature of an oath, and he will swear in any court that I was up in your office arranging some typewriting work for 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after my sister fell. Mr. Flambeau will tell you that he found me there."
There was a silence.
"Well then,"
cried Flambeau,
"Pauline was alone when she fell, yet it was a suicide."
"She was alone when she fell,"
said Father Brown.
"but it was not suicide."
"Then how did she die?"
asked Flambeau impatiently.
"She was murdered."
"But she was alone,"
objected the detective.
"She was murdered when she was all alone,"
answered the priest. All the rest stared at him, but he remained sitting in the same old dejected attitude, with a wrinkle in his round forehead, and an appearance of impersonal shame and sorrow. His voice was colourless and sad.
"What I want to know,"
cried Kalon with an oath,
"is when the police are coming for this bloody and wicked sister. She's killed her flesh and blood. She's robbed me of $500,000 that was just as sacredly mine as—"
Come, prophet,
interrupted Flambeau with a kind of sneer.
Remember that all this world is a cloudland.
The Hierophant of the Sun God made an effort to climb back on his pedestal.
"It is not the mere money,"
he cried,
"though that would equip the cause throughout the world. It is also my beloved one's wishes. To Pauline, all this was holy. In Pauline's eyes—"
Father Brown suddenly sprang erect so that his chair fell over flat behind him. He was deathly pale, yet he seemed fired with a new hope. His eyes shone.
"That's it,"
he cried in a clear voice.
"That's the way to begin. In Pauline's eyes—"
The tall prophet retreated before the tiny priest in almost mad disorder.
"What do you mean? How dare you?"
he cried repeatedly.
"In Pauline's eyes,"
repeated the priest, his own shining more and more.
Go on, go on. The foulest crime the fiends ever prompted feels lighter after confession, and I implore you to confess. Go on, go on. In Pauline's eyes—"
"Let me go, you devil!"
thundered Kalon, struggling like a giant in bonds.
"Who are you, you cursed spy, to weave your spider's webs round me, and peep and peer? Let me go!"
Shall I stop him?
asked Flambeau, bounding towards the exit, for Kalon had already thrown the door wide open.
"No, let him pass,"
said Father Brown with a strange deep sigh that seemed to come from the depths of the universe.
"Let Cain pass by, for he belongs to God."
There was a long-drawn silence in the room when he had left it, which was to Flambeau's fierce wits one long agony of interrogation. Miss Joan Stacy very coolly tidied up the papers on her desk.
"Father,"
said Flambeau at last,
"it is my duty and not my curiosity only. It is my duty to find out, if I can, who committed the crime."
"Which crime?"
asked Father Brown.
"The one we are dealing with, of course,"
replied his impatient friend.
"We are dealing with two crimes,"
said Brown.
"Crimes of very different weight and by very different criminals."
Miss Joan Stacy, having collected and put away her papers, proceeded to lock up her drawer. Father Brown went on, noticing her as little as she noticed him.
"The two crimes,"
he observed,
"were committed against the same weaknesses of the same person in a struggle for her money. The author of the larger crime found himself thwarted by the smaller crime. The author of the smaller crime got the money."
"Oh, don't go on like lecturer,"
groaned Flambeau.
"Put that in a few words."
"I can put it in one word,"
answered his friend. Miss Joan Stacy skewered her business-like black hat onto her head, with a business-like black frown before a little mirror, and as the conversation proceeded, took her handbag and umbrella in an unhurried style and left the room.
"The truth is one word and a short one,"
said Father Brown.
"Pauline Stacy was blind."
"Blind?"
repeated Flambeau, and rose slowly to his whole huge stature.
"She was subject to it by blood,"
Brown proceeded.
"Her sister would have started eyeglasses if Pauline would have let her, but it was her special philosophy or fad that one must not encourage such diseases by yielding to them. She would not admit the cloud, or she tried to dispel it by will. So her eyes got worse and worse with straining. But the worst strain was to come. It came with this precious prophet, or whatever he calls himself, who taught her to stare at the hot sun with the naked eye. It was called excepting Apollo. Oh, if these new pagans would only be old pagans, they would be a little wiser. The old pagans knew that mere naked nature worship must have a cruel side. They knew that the eye of Apollo can blast and blind.
There was a pause, and the priest went on, in a gentle and even broken voice.
Whether or no that devil deliberately made her blind, there is no doubt that he deliberately killed her through her blindness. The very simplicity of the crime is sickening. You know he and she went up and down in those lifts without official help. You know also how smoothly and silently the lifts slide. Kalon brought the lift to the girl's landing and saw her, through the open door, writing in a slow, sightless way the will she had promised him. He called out to her cheerily that he had left the lift ready for her, and she was to come out when she was ready. Then he pressed a button and shot soundlessly up to his own floor, walked through his own office, out onto his own balcony, and was safely praying before the crowded street, when the poor girl, having finished her work, ran gaily out to where her lover and lift were to receive her, and stepped—
"Don't!"
cried Flambeau.
He ought to have got $500,000 by pressing that button,
continued the little father, in the colourless voice in which he talked of such horrors.
But that went smash. It went smash because there happened to be another person who also wanted the money, and who also knew the secret about Pauline's sight. There was one thing about that will that I think nobody noticed. Although it was unfinished and without signature, the other Miss Stacy and some servant of hers had already signed it as witnesses. Joan had signed first, saying Pauline could finish it later, with a typical feminine contempt for legal forms. Therefore, Joan wanted her sister to sign the will without real witnesses. Why? I thought of the blindness, and felt sure that she had wanted Pauline to sign in solitude, because she had wanted her not to sign at all. People like the Stacys always used fountain pens, but this was specially natural to Pauline. By habit and her strong will and memory, she could still write almost as well as if she saw, but she could not tell when her pen needed dipping. Therefore her fountain pens were carefully filled by her sister, all except this fountain pen. This was carefully not filled by her sister. The remains of the ink held out for a few lines, and then failed altogether. And the prophet lost £500,000 and committed one of the most brutal and brilliant murders in human history for nothing.
Flambeau went to the open door and heard the official police ascending the stairs. He turned and said,
"You must have followed everything devilishly close to have traced the crime to Kalon in 10 minutes.
Father Brown gave a sort of start.
"Oh, to him,"
he said.
"No, I had to follow rather closely to find out about Miss Joan and the fountain pen. But I knew Kalon was the criminal before I came into the front door."
"You must be joking,"
cried Flambeau.
"I'm quite serious,"
answered the priest.
"I tell you I knew he had done it, even before I knew what he had done."
"But why?"
"These pagan Stoics,"
said Brown reflectively,
"always fail by their strength. There came a crash and a scream down the street, and the priest of Apollo did not start or look round. I did not know what it was, but I knew that he was expecting it."
End of The Eye of Apollo.
The Quarantine at Alexander Abraham's, Section 8 of The Chronicles of Avonlea, by Lucy Maud Montgomery, narrator Peter McPherson, read by Bookworm 360.
Alexander Abraham Bennett, read by Todd.
Reverend Mr. Allen, read by Wayne Cook.
Mrs. Allen, read by Wendy Katz-Hiller.
Dr. Blair, read by Greg Giordano.
Section 8. The Quarantine at Alexander Abraham's. I refused to take that class in Sunday school the first time I was asked. It was not that I objected to teaching in the Sunday school. On the contrary, I rather liked the idea. But it was the Reverend Mr. Allen who asked me, and it had always been a matter of principle with me never to do anything a man asked me to do if I could help it. I was noted for that. It saves a great deal of trouble, and it simplifies everything beautifully. I had always disliked men. It must have been born in me because as far back as I can remember, an antipathy to men and dogs was one of my strongest characteristics. I was noted for that. My experiences through life only served to deepen it. The more I saw of men, the more I liked cats. So, of course, when the Reverend Allen asked me if I would consent to take a class in Sunday school, I said no, in a fashion calculated to chasten him wholesomely. If he had sent his wife the first time, as he did the second, it would have been wiser. People generally do what Mrs. Allen asks them to do because they know it saves time. Mrs. Allen talked smoothly for half an hour before she mentioned the Sunday school and paid me several compliments. Mrs. Allen is famous for her tact. Tact is a faculty for meandering around to a given point instead of making a beeline. I have no tact. I am noted for that. As soon as Mrs. Allen's conversation came in sight of the Sunday school, I, who knew all along whether it was tending, said straight out, "What class do you want me to teach?" Mrs. Allen was so surprised that she forgot to be tactful, and answered plainly for once in her life.
There are 2 classes, one of boys and one of girls, needing a teacher. I've been teaching the girls' class, but I shall have to give it up for a little time on account of the baby's health. You may have your choice, Miss Macpherson.
Then I shall take the boys, I said decidedly. I am noted for my decision. Since they have to grow up to be men, it's well to train them properly betimes. Nuisances they are bound to become under any circumstances, but if they are taken in hand young enough, they may not grow up to be such nuisances as they otherwise would, and that will be some unfortunate woman's gain. Mrs. Allen looked dubious. I knew she had expected me to choose the girls.
They are a very wild set of boys,
she said. I never knew boys who weren't, I retorted.
I think perhaps you would like the girls best,
said Mrs. Allen hesitatingly. If it had not been for one thing, which I would never in this world have admitted to Mrs. Allen, I might have liked the girls' class best myself. But the truth was Anne Shirley was in that class, and Anne Shirley was the one living human being that I was afraid of. Not that I disliked her, but she had such a habit of asking weird, unexpected questions which a Philadelphia lawyer couldn't answer. Miss Rogerson had that class once, and Anne routed her horse, foot, and artillery. I wasn't going to undertake a class with a walking interrogation point in it like that. Besides, I thought Mrs. Allen required a slight snub. Ministers' wives are rather apt to think they can run everything and everybody if they are not wholesomely corrected now and again. It is not what I like best that must be considered, Mrs. Allen, I said rebukingly. It is what is best for those boys. I feel that I shall be best for them.
Oh, I've no doubt of that, Miss Macpherson,
said Mrs. Allen amiably. It was a fib for her minister's wife, though she was. She had doubt. She thought I would be a dismal failure as a teacher of a boys' class. But I was not. I am not often a dismal failure when I make up my mind to do a thing. I am noted for that.
It is wonderful what a reformation you have worked in that class, Miss Macpherson. Wonderful,
said the Reverend Mr. Allen some weeks later. He didn't mean to show how amazing a thing he thought it that an old maid noted for being a man-hater should have managed it, but his face betrayed him. Where does Jimmy Spencer live? I asked him crisply. He came one Sunday 3 weeks ago and hasn't been back since. I mean to find out why. Mr. Allen coughed.
I believe he is hired as handy boys with Alexander Abraham Bennett out on the White Sands Road,
he said. Then I am going out to Alexander Abraham Bennett's on the White Sands Road to see why Jimmy Spencer doesn't come to Sunday school, I said firmly. Mr. Allen's eyes twinkled ever so slightly. I have always insisted that if that man had not been a minister, he would have a sense of humor.
Possibly Mr. Bennett will not appreciate your kind interest. He has a singular aversion to your sex, I understand. No woman has ever been known to get inside of Mr. Bennett's house since his sister died 20 years ago.
Oh, he is the one, is he? I said, remembering. He is the woman-hater who threatens that if a woman comes into his yard, he'll chase her out with a pitchfork. Well, he will not chase me out. Mr. Allen gave a chuckle, a ministerial chuckle, but still a chuckle. It irritated me slightly because it seemed to imply that he thought Alexander Abraham Bennett would be one too many for me. But I did not show Mr. Allen that he annoyed me. It is always a great mistake to let a man see that he can vex you. The next afternoon I harnessed my sorrel pony to the buggy and drove down to Alexander Abraham Bennett's. As usual, I took William Adolphus with me for company. William Adolphus is my favorite among my 6 cats. He is black, with a white dicky and beautiful white paws. He sat up on the seat beside me and looked far more like a gentleman than many a man I've seen in a similar position. Alexander Abraham's place was about 3 miles along the White Sands Road. I knew the house as soon as I came to it by its neglected appearance. It needed paint badly, the blinds were crooked and torn, weeds grew up to the very door. Plainly there was no woman about that place. Still, it was a nice house, and the barns were splendid. My father always said that when a man's barns were bigger than his house, it was a sign that his income exceeded his expenditure. So it was all right that they should be bigger, but it was all wrong that they should be trimmer and better painted. Still, thought I, what else could you expect of a woman-hater? But Alexander Abraham evidently knows how to run a farm, even if he is a woman-hater, I remarked to William Adolphus as I got out and tied the pony to the railing. I had driven up to the house from the back way, and now I was opposite a side door opening on the veranda. I thought I might as well go to it, so I tucked William Adolphus under my arm and marched up the path. Just as I was halfway up, a dog swooped around the front corner and made straight for me. He was the ugliest dog I had ever seen, and he didn't even bark, just came silently and speedily on with a businesslike eye. I never stop to argue manners with a dog that doesn't bark. I know when discretion is the better part of valor. Firmly clasping William Adolphus, I ran, not to the door, because the dog was between me and it, but to a big, low-branching cherry tree at the back corner of the house. I reached it in time and no more. First thrusting William Adolphus onto a limb above my head, I scrambled up into that blessed tree without stopping to think how it might look to Alexander Abraham if he happened to be watching. My time for reflection came when I found myself perched halfway up the tree with William Adolphus beside me. William Adolphus was quite calm and unruffled. I can hardly say with truthfulness what I was. On the contrary, I admit that I felt considerably upset. The dog was sitting on his haunches on the ground below, watching us, and it was quite plain to be seen, from his leisurely manner, that it was not his busy day. He bared his teeth and growled when he caught my eye. "You look like a woman-hater's dog," I told him. I meant it for an insult, but the beast took it for a compliment. Then I set myself to solving the question, how am I to get out of this predicament? It did not seem easy to solve it. "Shall I scream, William Adolphus?" I demanded of that intelligent animal. William Adolphus shook his head. This is a fact. And I agreed with him. "No, I shall not scream, William Adolphus," I said. "There is probably no one to hear me except Alexander Abraham, and I have my painful doubts about his tender mercies. Now it is impossible to go down. Is it then, William Adolphus, possible to go up?" I looked up. Just above my head was an open window with a tolerably stout branch extending right across it. "Shall we try that way, William Adolphus?" I asked. William Adolphus, wasting no words, began to climb the tree. I followed his examples. The dog ran in circles around the tree, and looked things not lawful to be uttered. It probably would have been a relief to him to bark if it hadn't been so against his principles. I got in by the window easily enough, and found myself in a bedroom the like of which for disorder and dust and general awfulness I had never seen in all my life. But I did not pause to take in details. With William Adolphus under my arm, I marched downstairs, fervently hoping I should meet no one on the way. I did not. The hall below was empty and dusty. I opened the first door I came to and walked boldly in. A man was sitting by the window, looking moodily out. I should have known him for Alexander Abraham anywhere. He had just the same uncared-for, ragged appearance that the house had, and yet, like the house, it seemed that he would not be bad-looking if he were trimmed up a little. His hair looked as if it had never been combed, and his whiskers were wild in the extreme. He looked at me with blank amazement in his countenance. "Where is Jimmy Spencer?" I demanded. "I have come to see him."
"How did he ever let you in?"
asked the man, staring at me. "He didn't let me in," I retorted. "He chased me all over the lawn, and I only saved myself from being torn piecemeal by scrambling up a tree. You ought to be prosecuted for keeping such a dog. Where is Jimmy?" Instead of answering, Alexander Abraham began to laugh in a most unpleasant fashion.
"Trust a woman for getting into a man's house if she has made up her mind to,"
he said disagreeably. Seeing that it was his intention to vex me, I remained cool and collected. "Oh, I wasn't particular about getting into your house, Mr. Bennet," I said calmly. "I had but little choice in the matter. It was get in lest a worse fate befall me. It was not you or your house I wanted to see, though I admit that it is worth seeing if a person is anxious to find out how dirty a place can be. It was Jimmy. For the third and last time, where is Jimmy?"
"Jimmy is not here,"
said Mr. Bennet gruffly, but not quite so assuredly.
"He left last week and hired with a man over at Newbridge."
"In that case," I said, picking up William Adolphus, who had been exploring the room with a disdainful air, "I won't disturb you any longer. I shall go."
"Yes, I think it would be the wisest thing,"
said Alexander Abraham, not disagreeably this time, but reflectively, as if there was some doubt about the matter.
"I'll let you out by the back door. Then the the dog will not interfere with you. Please go away quietly and quickly."
I wondered if Alexander Abraham thought I would go away with a whoop, but I said nothing, thinking this the most dignified course of conduct, and I followed him out to the kitchen as quickly and quietly as he could have wished. Such a kitchen! Alexander Abraham opened the door, which was locked, just as a buggy containing 2 men drove into the yard.
"Too late,"
he exclaimed in a tragic tone. I understood that something dreadful must have happened, but I did not care, since, as I fondly supposed, it did not concern me. I pushed out past Alexander Abraham, who was looking as guilty as if he had been caught burglarizing, and came face to face with the man who had sprung from the buggy. It was old Dr. Blair from Carmody, and he was looking at me as if he had found me shoplifting.
"My dear Peter,"
he said gravely,
"I am very sorry to see you here. Very sorry indeed."
I admit that this exasperated me. Besides, no man on earth, not even my own family doctor, has any right to my dear Peter me. "There is no loud call for sorrow, doctor," I said loftily. "If a woman, 48 years of age, a member of the Presbyterian Church in good and regular standing, cannot call upon one of her Sunday school callers without wrecking all of the proprieties, how old must she be before she can?" The doctor did not answer my question. Instead, he looked reproachfully at Alexander Abraham.
"Is this how you keep your word, Mr. Bennet?"
he said.
"I thought that you promised me that you would not let anyone into the house."
"I didn't let her in,"
growled Mr. Bennet.
"Good heavens, man! She climbed in at an upstairs window, despite the presence on my grounds of a policeman and a dog. What is to be done with a woman like that?"
"I do not understand what all this means," I said, addressing myself to the doctor and ignoring Alexander Abraham entirely. "But if my presence here is so extremely inconvenient to all concerned, you can soon be relieved of it. I am going at once."
"I am very sorry, my dear Peter,"
said the doctor impressively,
"but that is just what I cannot allow you to do. This house is under quarantine for smallpox. You will have to stay here."
Smallpox! For the first and last time in my life I openly lost my temper with a man. I wheeled furiously upon Alexander Abraham. "Why didn't you tell me?" I cried.
"Tell you?"
he said, glaring at me.
"When I first saw you, it was too late to tell you. I thought the kindest thing I could do was to hold my tongue and let you get away in happy ignorance. This will teach you to take a man's house by storm, madam."
Now, don't quarrel, my good people,"
interposed the doctor seriously, but I saw a twinkle in his eye.
"You'll have to spend some time together under the same roof, and you won't improve the situation by disagreeing. You see, Peter, it was this way. Mr. Bennet was in town yesterday, where, as you are aware, there is a bad outbreak of smallpox, and took dinner in a boarding-house where one of the maids was ill. Last night she developed unmistakable symptoms of smallpox. The Board of Health at once got after all the people who were in the house yesterday, so far as they could locate them, and put them under quarantine. I came down here this morning and explained the matter to Mr. Bennet. I brought Jeremiah Jeffries to guard the front of the house, and Mr. Bennet gave me his word of honor that he would not let anyone in by the back way, while I went to get another policeman and make all the necessary arrangements. I have brought Thomas Wright, and have secured the services of another man to attend to Mr. Bennet's barn work and bring provisions to the house. Jacob Green and Cleophas Lee will watch at night. I don't think there is much danger of Mr. Bennet's taking the smallpox, but until we are sure, you must remain here, Peter."
While listening to the doctor, I had been thinking. It was the most distressing predicament I had ever got into in my life, but there was no sense in making it worse. "Very well, doctor," I said calmly. "Yes, I was vaccinated a month ago when the news of the smallpox first came. When you go back through Avonlea, kindly go to Sarah Pye and ask her to live in my house during my absence and look after things, especially the cats. Tell her to give them new milk twice a day and a square inch of butter apiece once a week. Get her to put my 2 dark print wrappers, some aprons, and some changes of underclothing in my 3rd best valise and have it sent down to me. My pony is tied out there to the fence. Please take him home. That is all, I think."
"No, it isn't all,"
said Alexander Abraham grumpily.
"Send that cat home, too. I won't have a cat around the place. I'd rather have smallpox."
I looked Alexander Abraham over gradually, in a way I have, beginning at his feet and travelling up to his head. I took my time over it, and then I said very quietly, "You may have both. Anyhow, you'll have to have William Adolphus. He is under quarantine as well as you and I. Do you suppose I am going to have my cat ranging at large through Avonlea, scattering smallpox germs among innocent people? I'll have to put up with that dog of yours. You will have to endure William Adolphus." Alexander Abraham groaned, but I could see that the way I had looked him over had chastened him considerably. The doctor drove away, and I went into the house, not choosing to linger outside and be grinned at by Thomas Wright. I hung my coat up in the hall and laid my bonnet carefully on the sitting-room table, having first dusted a clean place for it with my handkerchief. I longed to fall upon that house at once and clean it up, but I had to wait until the doctor came back with my wrapper. I could not clean a house in my new suit and a silk shirtwaist. Alexander Abraham was sitting on a chair looking at me. Presently he said,
"I am not curious, but will you kindly tell me why the doctor called you Peter?"
"Because that is my name, I suppose," I answered, shaking up a cushion for William Adolphus and thereby disturbing the dust of years. Alexander Abraham coughed gently.
"Isn't that rather a peculiar name for a woman?"
"It is," I said, wondering how much soap, if any, there was in the house.
"I am not curious,"
said Alexander Abraham.
"But would you mind telling me how you came to be called Peter?"
If I had been a boy, my parents intended to call me Peter in honor of a rich uncle. When I, fortunately, turned out to be a girl, my mother insisted that I should be called Angelina. They gave me both names and called me Angelina, but as soon as I grew old enough, I decided to be called Peter. It was bad enough, but not so bad as Angelina.
"I should say it was more appropriate,"
said Alexander Abraham, intending, as I perceived, to be disagreeable. "Precisely," I agreed calmly. "My last name is Macpherson, and I live in Avonlea. As you are not curious, that will be all the information you will need about me."
"Oh."
Alexander Abraham looked as if a light had broken in on him.
"I've heard of you. You, pretend to dislike men."
Pretend! Goodness only knows what would have happened to Alexander Abraham just then if a diversion had not taken place. But the door opened and a dog came in. The dog. I suppose he had got tired of waiting under the cherry tree for William Adolphus and me to come down. He was even uglier indoors than out.
"Oh, Mr. Riley, Mr. Riley, see what you have let me in for,"
said Alexander Abraham reproachfully. But Mr. Riley, since that was the brute's name, paid no attention to Alexander Abraham. He had caught sight of William Adolphus curled up on the cushion, and he started across the room to investigate him. William Adolphus sat up and began to take notice. "Call off that dog," I said warningly to Alexander Abraham.
"Call him off yourself,"
he retorted.
"Since you've brought that cat here, you can protect him."
"Oh, it wasn't for William Adolphus's sake I spoke," I said pleasantly. "William Adolphus can protect himself." William Adolphus could and did. He humped his back, flattened his ears, swore once, and then made a flying leap for Mr. Riley. William Adolphus landed squarely on Mr. Riley's brindled back and promptly took fast hold, spitting and clawing and caterwaddling. You never saw a more astonished dog than Mr. Riley. With a yell of terror, he bolted out to the kitchen, out of the kitchen, into the hall, through the hall, into the room, and so into the kitchen and round again. With each circuit he went faster and faster until he looked like a brindled streak with a dash of black and white on top. Such a racket and commotion I never heard, and I laughed until the tears came into my eyes. Mr. Riley flew around and William Adolphus held on grimly and clawed. Alexander Abraham turned purple with rage.
"Woman, call off that infernal cat before he kills my dog,"
he shouted above the din of yelps and yowls. "Oh, he won't kill him," I said reassuringly, "and he's going too fast to hear me if I did call him. If you can stop the dog, Mr. Bennet, I'll guarantee to make William Adolphus listen to reason, but there's no use trying to argue with a lightning flash." Alexander Abraham made a frantic lunge at the brindled streak as it whirled past him, with the result that he overbalanced himself and went sprawling on the floor with a crash. I ran to help him up, which only seemed to enrage him further.
"Woman,"
he spluttered viciously,
"I wish you and your fiend of a cat were in
Avonlea," I finished quickly, to save Alexander Abraham from committing profanity. "So do I, Mr. Bennet, with all my heart. But since we are not, let us make the best of it, like sensible people. And in the future you will kindly remember that my name is Miss Macpherson, not woman." With this the end came, and I was thankful, for the noise those two animals made was so terrific that I expected the policeman would be rushing in, smallpox or no smallpox, to see if Alexander Abraham and I were trying to murder each other. Mr. Riley suddenly veered in his mad career and bolted into a dark corner between the stove and the woodbox. William Adolphus let go just in time. There never was any more trouble with Mr. Riley after that. A meeker, more thoroughly chastened dog you could not find. William Adolphus had the best of it, and he kept it. Seeing that things had calmed down and that it was 5 o'clock, I decided to get tea. I told Alexander Abraham that I would prepare it if he would show me where the eatables were.
"You needn't mind,"
said Alexander Abraham.
"I've been in the habit of getting my own tea for 20 years.
I dare say, but you haven't been in the habit of getting mine, I said firmly. I wouldn't eat anything you cooked if I starved to death. If you want some occupation, you better get some salve and anoint the scratches on that poor dog's back. Alexander Abraham said something that I prudently did not hear. Seeing that he had no information to hand out, I went on an exploring expedition into the pantry. The place was awful beyond description, and for the first time a vague sentiment of pity for Alexander Abraham glimmered in my breast. When a man had to live in such surroundings, the wonder was, not that he hated women, but that he didn't hate the whole human race. But I got up a supper somehow. I am noted for getting up suppers. The bread was from the Carmody bakery, and I made good tea and excellent toast. Besides, I found a can of peaches in the pantry, which, as they were bought, I wasn't afraid to eat. The tea and toast mellowed Alexander Abraham in spite of himself. He ate the last crust, and didn't growl when I gave William Adolphus all the cream that was left. Mr. Riley did not seem to want anything. He had no appetite. By this time the doctor's boy had arrived with my valise. Alexander Abraham gave me quite civilly to understand that there was a spare room across the hall, and that I might take possession of it. I went to it and put on a wrapper. There was a set of fine furniture in the room and a comfortable bed, but the dust! William Adolphus had followed me in, and his paws left marks everywhere he walked. Now, I said briskly, returning to the kitchen, I am going to clean up, and I shall begin with this kitchen. You better betake yourself to the sitting room, Mr. Bennet, so as to be out of the way. Alexander Abraham glared at me.
"I'm not going to have my house meddled with,"
he snapped.
"It suits me. If you don't like it, you can leave it."
No, I can't. That is just the trouble, I said pleasantly. If I could leave it, I shouldn't be here for a minute. Since I can't, it simply has to be cleaned. I can tolerate men and dogs when I am compelled to, but I cannot and will not tolerate dirt and disorder. Go into the sitting room. Alexander Abraham went. As he closed the door, I heard him say, in capitals,
"What an awful woman!"
I cleared that kitchen and the pantry adjoining. It was 10 o'clock when I got through, and Alexander Abraham had gone to bed without deigning further speech. I locked Mr. Riley in one room and William Adolphus in another, and went to bed too. I had never felt so dead tired in my life before. It had been a hard day. But I got up bright and early the next morning and got a tip-top breakfast, which Alexander Abraham condescended to eat. When the provision man came into the yard, I called to him from the window to bring me a box of soap in the afternoon, and then I tackled the sitting room. It took me the best part of a week to get the house in order, but I did it thoroughly. I am noted for doing things thoroughly. At the end of the time, it was clean from garret to cellar. Alexander Abraham made no comments on my operations, though he groaned loud and often, and said caustic things to poor Mr. Riley, who hadn't the spirit to answer back, after his drubbing by William Adolphus. I made allowances for Alexander Abraham, because his vaccination had been taken and his arm was real sore, and I cooked elegant meals, not having much else to do, once I had got things scoured up. The house was full of provisions. Alexander Abraham wasn't mean about such things, I will say that for him. Altogether, I was more comfortable than I had expected to be. When Alexander Abraham wouldn't talk, I let him alone, and when he would, I just said as sarcastic things as he did, only I said them smiling and pleasant. I could see he had a wholesome awe for me, but now and then he seemed to forget his disposition and talk like a human being. We had one or two real interesting conversations. Alexander Abraham was an intelligent man, though he had got terribly warped. I told him once I thought he might have been nice when he was a boy. One day he astonished me by appearing at the dinner table with his hair brushed and a white collar on. We had a tip-top dinner that day, and I had made a pudding that was far too good for a woman-hater. When Alexander Abraham had disposed of 2 large platefuls of it, he sighed and said,
You can certainly cook. It's a pity you are such a detestable crank in other respects."
"It's kind of convenient being a crank," I said. "People are careful how they meddle with you. Haven't you found that out in your own experience?"
"I am not a crank,"
growled Alexander Abraham resentfully.
"All I ask is to be let alone."
"That's the very crankiest kind of crank," I said. "A person who wants to be let alone flies in the face of Providence, who decreed that folks for their own good were not to be let alone. But cheer up, Mr. Bennet. The quarantine will be up on Tuesday, and then you'll certainly be let alone for the rest of your natural life as far as William Adolphus and I are concerned. You may then return to your wallowing in the mire and be as dirty and comfortable as of yore." Alexander Abraham growled again. The prospect didn't seem to cheer him up as much as I should have expected. Then he did an amazing thing. He poured some cream into a saucer and set it down before William Adolphus. William Adolphus lapped it up, keeping one eye on Alexander Abraham, lest the latter should change his mind. Not to be outdone, I handed Mr. Riley a bone. Neither Alexander Abraham nor I had worried much about the smallpox. We didn't believe he would take it, for he hadn't even seen the girl who was sick. But the very next morning I heard him calling me from the upstairs landing.
Miss Macpherson,
he said in a voice so uncommonly mild that it gave me an uncanny feeling.
what are the symptoms of smallpox?
Chills and flushes, pain in the limbs and back, nausea and vomiting, I answered promptly, for I had been reading them up in a patent medicine almanac.
I've got them all,
said Alexander Abraham hollowly. I didn't feel as much scared as I should have expected, after enduring a woman-hater and a brindle dog and the early disorder of that house, and coming off best with all three. Smallpox seemed rather insignificant. I went to the window and called to Thomas Wright to send for the doctor. The doctor came down from Alexander Abraham's room looking grave.
"It's impossible to pronounce on the disease yet,"
he said.
"There is no certainty until the eruption appears. But, of course, there is every likelihood that it is the smallpox. It is very unfortunate. I am afraid that it will be difficult to get a nurse. All the nurses in town who will take smallpox cases are over busy now, for the epidemic is still raging there. However, I'll go into town tonight and do my best. Meanwhile, at present, you must not go near him, Peter."
I wasn't going to take orders from any man, and as soon as the doctor had gone, I marched straight up to Alexander Abraham's room with some dinner for him on a tray. There was a lemon cream I thought he could eat, even if he had the smallpox.
You shouldn't come near me,
he growled.
You are risking your life.
I am not going to see a fellow creature starve to death, even if he is a man, I retorted.
The worst of it all,
groaned Alexander Abraham between mouthfuls of lemon cream,
is that the doctor says I've got to have a nurse. I've got so kind of used to you being in the house that I don't mind you. But the thought of another woman coming here is too much. Did you give my poor dog anything to eat?
He has had a better dinner than many a Christian, I said severely. Alexander Abraham need not have worried about another woman coming in. The doctor came back that night with care on his brow.
"I don't know what is to be done,"
he said.
"I can't get a soul to come here."
I shall nurse Mr. Bennet, I said with dignity. It is my duty, and I never shirk my duty. I am noted for that. He is a man, and he has smallpox, and he keeps a vile dog, but I am not going to see him die for lack of care for all that.
"You're a good soul, Peter,"
said the doctor, looking relieved, manlike, as soon as he found a woman to shoulder the responsibility. I nursed Alexander Abraham through the smallpox, and I didn't mind it much. He was much more amiable sick than well, and he had the disease in a very mild form. Below stairs I reigned supreme, and Mr. Riley and William Adolphus lay down together like the lion and the lamb. I fed Mr. Riley regularly, and once, seeing him look lonesome, I patted him gingerly. It was nicer than I thought it would be. Mr. Riley lifted his head and looked at me with an expression in his eyes which cured me of wondering why on earth Alexander Abraham was so fond of the beast. When Alexander Abraham was able to sit up, he began to make up for the time he'd lost being pleasant. Anything more sarcastic than that man and his convalescence you couldn't imagine. I just laughed at him, having found out that could be depended on to irritate him. To irritate him still further, I cleaned the house all over again. But what vexed him most of all was that Mr. Riley took to following me about and wagging what he had of a tail at me.
It wasn't enough that you should come into my peaceful house and turn it upside down, but you have to alienate the affections of my dog,
complained Alexander Abraham. He'll get fond of you again when I go home, he said comfortingly. Dogs aren't very particular that way. What they want is bones. Cats now, they love disinterestedly. William Adolphus has never swerved in his allegiance to me, although you do give him cream in the pantry on the sly. Alexander Abraham looked foolish. He hadn't thought I knew that. I didn't take the smallpox, and in another week the doctor came out and sent the policeman home. I was disinfected, and William Adolphus was fumigated, and then we were free to go. "Goodbye, Mr. Bennet," I said, offering to shake hands in a forgiving spirit. "I've no doubt that you are glad to be rid of me, but you are no gladder than I am to go. I suppose this house will be dirtier than ever in a month's time, and Mr. Riley will have discarded the little polish his manners have taken on. Reformation with men and dogs never goes very deep." With this Parthian shaft, I walked out of the house, supposing that I had seen the last of it and Alexander Abraham. I was glad to get back home, of course, but it did seem queer and lonesome. The cats hardly knew me, and William Adolphus roamed about forlornly and appeared to feel like an exile. I didn't take as much pleasure in cooking as usual, for it seemed kind of foolish to be fussing over oneself. The sight of a bone made me think of poor Mr. Riley. The neighbors avoided me pointedly, for they couldn't get rid of the fear that I might erupt into smallpox at any moment. My Sunday school class had been given to another woman, and altogether I felt as if I didn't belong anywhere. I had existed like this for a fortnight, when Alexander Abraham suddenly appeared. He walked in one evening at dusk, but at first sight I didn't know him, he was so spruced and barbered up. But William Adolphus knew him. Will you believe it? William Adolphus, my own William Adolphus, rubbed up against that man's trouser leg with an undisguised purr of satisfaction.
I had to come, Angelina,
said Alexander Abraham.
I couldn't stand it any longer.
My name is Peter, I said coldly, although I was feeling ridiculously glad about something.
It isn't,
said Alexander Abraham stubbornly.
It is Angelina for me, and always will be. I shall never call you Peter. Angelina just suits you exactly, and Angelina Bennet would suit you still better. You must come back, Angelina. Mr. Riley is moping for you, and I can't get along without somebody to appreciate my sarcasms, now that you have accustomed me to the luxury.
What about the other 5 cats? I demanded. Alexander Abraham sighed.
Oh, I suppose they'll have to come too.
He sighed.
Though no doubt they'll chase poor Mr. Riley clean off the premises. But I can live without him, and I can't without you. How soon can you be ready to marry me?
I haven't said that I was going to marry you at all, have I? I said tartly, just to be consistent, for I wasn't feeling tart.
No, but you will, won't you?
Said Alexander Abraham anxiously.
Because if you won't, I wish you'd let me die of the smallpox. Do, dear Angelina.
To think that a man should dare to call me his dear Angelina, and to think that I shouldn't mind. Where I go, William Adolphus goes, I said, but I shall give away the other 5 cats for the sake of Mr. Riley. End of the quarantine at Alexander Abraham's.
Chapter 5 of Hearts of Three by Jack London. Dramatis Personae. Narrated by Lynette Calkins.
Francis Morgan. Read by Greg Giordano.
Henry Morgan. Read by Benjamin Tucker.
Pedro Zurita by Scott Calkins.
Raphael. Read by Wayne Cook.
Ignacio, read by Larry Wilson.
Augustino, read by Jim Locke.
Gendarme, read by Todd.
Chapter 5 of Hearts of Three by Jack London. It was in the mid-afternoon, and Henry, at his barred cell window, stared out into the street and wondered if any sort of breeze would ever begin to blow off of Chiriqui Lagoon and cool the stagnant air. The street was dusty and filthy. Filthy because the only scavengers it had ever known since the town was founded centuries before were the carrion dogs and obscene buzzards, even then prowling and hopping about in the debris. Low, whitewashed buildings of stone and adobe made the street a furnace. The white of it all, and the dust, was almost achingly intolerable to the eyes, and Henry would have withdrawn his gaze had not the several ragged mozos, dozing in a doorway opposite, suddenly aroused and looked interestedly up the street. Henry could not see, but he could hear the rattling spokes of some vehicle coming at speed. Next it surged into view, a rattletrap light wagon drawn by a runaway horse. In the seat, a gray-headed, gray-bearded ancient strove vainly to check the animal. Henry smiled and marveled that the rickety wagon could hold together, so prodigious were the bumps imparted to it by the deep ruts. Every wheel, half-dished and threatening to dish, wobbled and revolved out of line with every other wheel. And if the wagon held intact, Henry judged, it was a miracle that the crazy harness did not fly to pieces. When directly opposite the window, the old man made a last effort, half standing up from the seat as he pulled on the reins. One was rotten and broke. As the driver fell backward into the seat, his weight on the remaining rein caused the horse to swerve sharply to the right. What happened then, whether a wheel dished or whether a wheel had come off first and dished afterward, Henry could not determine. The one incontestable thing was that the wagon was a wreck. The old man, dragging in the dust and stubbornly hanging on to the remaining rein, swung the horse in a circle until it stopped, facing him and snorting at him. By the time he gained his feet, a crowd of mozos was forming about him. These were roughly shouldered right and left by the gendarmes who erupted from the jail. Henry remained at the window and, for a man with but a few hours to live, was an amused spectator and listener to what followed. Giving his horse to a gendarme to hold, not stopping to brush the filth from his person, the old man limped hurriedly to the wagon and began an examination of the several packing cases, large and small, which composed its load. Of one case he was especially solicitous, even trying to lift it and seeming to listen as he lifted. He straightened up on being addressed by one of the gendarmes, and made voluble reply.
Me? Alas, senors, I am an old man, and far from home. I am Leopoldo Narvaez. It is true, my mother was German. May the saints preserve her rest. But my father was Baltazar de Jesus et Corvallis et Narvaez, son of General Narvaez of martial memory, who fought under the great Bolivar himself. And now I am half ruined and far from home.
Prompted by other questions, interlarded with the courteous expressions of sympathy with which even the humblest mozo is over-generously supplied, he managed to be delightfully grateful and to run on with his tale.
I have driven from Bocas del Toro. It has taken me 5 days, and business has been poor. My home is in Cologne, and I wish I were safely there. But even a noble Narvaez may be a peddler, and even a peddler must live, eh, senors? Is it not so? But tell me, is there not a Tomas Romero who dwells in this pleasant city of San Antonio?
There are any God's number of Tomas Romeros who dwell everywhere in Panama,
laughed Pedro Zurita, the assistant jailer.
One would need a fuller description.
He is the cousin of my second wife,
the ancient answered hopefully, and seemed bewildered by the roar of laughter from the crowd.
And a dozen Tomas Romeros live in and about San Antonio,
the assistant jailer went on.
Any one of which may be your second wife's cousin, senor. There is Tomas Romero the drunkard, there is Tomas Romero the thief, there is Tomas Romero, but no, he was hanged a month back for murder and robbery. There is the rich Tomas Romero who owns many cattle on the hills. There is...
To each suggested one, Leopoldo Narvaez had shaken his head dolefully, until the cattle owner was mentioned. At this, he had become hopeful, and broke in,
Pardon me, senor. It must be he, or some such a one as he. I shall find him. If my precious stock in trade can be safely stored, I shall seek him now. It is well my misfortune came upon me where it did. I shall be able to trust it with you, who are, one can see with half an eye, an honest and an honorable man.
As he talked, he fumbled forth from his pocket 2 silver pesos and handed them to the jailer.
There, I wish you and your men to have some pleasure of assisting me.
Henry grinned to himself as he noted the access of interest in the old man and of consideration for him on the part of Pedro Zurita and the gendarmes, caused by the present of the coins. They shoved the more curious of the crowd roughly back from the wrecked wagon and began to carry the boxes into the jail.
Careful, senors, careful,
the old one pleaded, greatly anxious as they took hold of the big box.
Handle it gently. It is of value, and it is fragile, most fragile.
While the contents of the wagon were being carried into the jail, the old man removed and deposited in the wagon all harness from the horse, save the bridle. Pedro Zurita ordered the harness taken in as well, explaining, with a glare at the miserable crowd,
Not a strap or buckle would remain the second after our backs were turned.
Using what was left of the wagon for a stepping block, and ably assisted by the jailer and his crew, the peddler managed to get astride his animal.
It is well,
he said, and added gratefully,
1,000 thanks, senors. It has been my good fortune to meet with honest men with whom my goods will be safe. Only poor goods. Peddler's goods, you understand. But to me, everything, my way upon the road. The pleasure has been mine to meet you. Tomorrow I shall return with my kinsman, whom I certainly shall find, and relieve from you the burden of safeguarding my inconsiderable property.
He doffed his hat.
Adios, señors. Adios.
He rode away at a careful walk, timid of the animal he bestrode which had caused his catastrophe. He halted and turned his head at a call from Pedro Zurita.
Search the graveyard, Señor Narvaez.
The jailer advised.
Full 100 Tomas Romeros lie there.
And be vigilant, I beg of you, señor, of the heavy box.
The peddler called back. Henry watched the street grow deserted as the gendarmes and the populace fled from the scorch of the sun.
Small wonder,
he thought to himself,
that the old peddler's voice had sounded vaguely familiar. It had been because he had possessed only half a Spanish tongue to twist around the language, the other half being the German tongue of the mother. Even so, he talked like a native, and he would be robbed like a native if there was anything of value in the heavy box deposited with the jailers.
Henry concluded, ere dismissing the incident from his mind. In the guard-room, a scant 50 feet away from Henry's cell, Leopoldo Narvaez was being robbed. It had begun by Pedro Zurita making a profound and wistful survey of the large box. He lifted one end of it to sample its weight, and sniffed like a hound at the crack of it, as if his nose might give him some message of its contents.
Leave that alone, Pedro.
One of the gendarmes laughed at him.
You have been paid 2 pesos to be honest.
The assistant jailer sighed, walked away and sat down, looked back at the box, and sighed again. Conversation languished. Continually the eyes of the men roved to the box. A greasy pack of cards could not divert them. The game languished. The gendarme who had twitted Pedro himself went to the box and sniffed.
I smell nothing,
he announced.
Absolutely in the box there is nothing to smell. Now, what can it be? The caballero said it was of value.
Caballero,
sniffed another of the gendarmes.
The old man's father was more like to have been peddler of rotten fish on the streets of Colon, and his father before him. Every lying beggar claims descent from the conquistadors.
And why not, Raphael?
Pedro Zurita retorted.
Are we not also descended?
Without doubt.
Raphael readily agreed.
The conquistadores slew many.
And were the ancestors of those that survived.
Pedro completed for him and aroused a general laugh.
Just the same, almost would I give one of these pesos to know what is in that box.
That is Ignacio.
Raphael greeted the entrance of a turnkey whose heavy eyes tokened he was just out of his siesta.
He was not paid to be honest. Come, Ignacio, relieve our curiosity by letting us know what is in the box.
How should I know?
Ignacio demanded, blinking at the object of interest.
Only now I have awakened.
You have not been paid to be honest, then?
Raphael asked.
Merciful Mother of God, who is the man who would pay me to be honest?
The turnkey demanded.
Then take the hatchet there, and open the box.
Raphael drove his point home.
We may not, for as surely as Pedro is to share the 2 pesos with us, that surely we have been paid to be honest. Open the box, Ignacio, or we shall perish of our curiosity.
We will look. We will only look.
Pedro muttered nervously as the turnkey prized off a board with the blade of the hatchet.
Then we will close the box again, and put your hand in, Ignacio. What is it you find, eh? What does it feel like? Ah!
After pulling and tugging, Ignacio's hand had reappeared, clutching a cardboard carton.
Remove it carefully, for it must be replaced,
the jailer cautioned. And when the wrappings of paper and tissue paper were removed, all eyes focused on a quart bottle of rye whiskey.
How excellently is it composed,
Pedro murmured in tones of awe.
It must be very good that such care be taken of it.
It is Americano whiskey.
sighed a gendarme.
Once only have I drunk Americano whiskey. It was wonderful. Such was the courage of it that I leaped into the bull ring at Santos and faced a wild bull with my hands. It is true the bull rolled me, but did I not leap into the ring?
Pedro took the bottle and prepared to knock its neck off.
Hold,
cried Raphael.
You were paid to be honest.
By a man who was not himself honest,
came the retort.
The stuff is contraband. It has never paid duty. The old man was in possession of smuggled goods. Let us now gratefully and with clear conscience invest ourselves in its possession. We will confiscate it. We will destroy it.
Not waiting for the bottle to pass, Ignacio and Raphael unwrapped fresh ones and broke off the necks.
3 stars. Most excellent.
Pedro Zurita orated in a pause, pointing to the trademark.
You see, all gringo whiskey is good. 1 star shows that it is very good. 2 stars that it is excellent. 3 stars that it is superb, the best, and better than beyond that. Ah, I know. The gringos are strong on strong drink. No pulque for them.
And 4 stars?
queried Ignacio, his voice husky from the liquor, the moisture glistening in his eyes.
4 stars? Friend Ignacio, 4 stars would be either sudden death or translation into paradise.
In not many minutes, Raphael, his arm around another gendarme, was calling him brother and proclaiming that it took little to make men happy here below.
The old man was a fool, 3 times a fool, and thrice that,
volunteered Agostino, a sullen-faced gendarme who for the first time gave tongue to speech.
Viva Agostino!
cheered Raphael.
The 3 stars have worked a miracle. Behold, have they not unlocked Agostino's mouth?
and thrice times thrice again was the old man a fool.
Agostino bellowed fiercely.
The very drink of the gods was his, all his, and he has been 5 days alone with it on the road from Bocas del Toro, and never taken one little sip. Such fools as he should be stretched out naked on an ant-heap, say I.
The old man was a rogue,
quoth Pedro.
And when he comes back tomorrow for his 3 stars, I shall arrest him for a smuggler. It will be a feather in all our caps.
If we destroy the evidence thus,
queried Agostino, knocking off another neck.
We will save the evidence thus,
Pedro replied, smashing an empty bottle on the stone flags.
Listen, comrades. The box was very heavy. We are all agreed it fell. The bottles broke. The liquor ran out, and so were we made aware of the contraband. The box and the broken bottles will be evidence sufficient.
The uproar grew as the liquor diminished. One gendarme quarreled with Ignacio over a forgotten debt of 10 centavos. 2 others sat upon the floor, arms around each other's necks, and wept over the miseries of their married lot. Agostino, like a very spendthrift of speech, explained his philosophy that silence was golden, and Pedro Zurita became sentimental on brotherhood.
Even my prisoners,
he maundered.
I love them as brothers. Life is sad.
A gush of tears in his eyes made him desist while he took another drink.
My prisoners are my very children. My heart bleeds for them. Behold, I weep. Let us share with them. Let them have a moment's happiness. Ignacio, dearest brother of my heart, do me a favor. See, I weep on your hand. Carry a bottle of this elixir to the gringo Morgan. Tell him my sorrow that he must hang tomorrow. Give him my love and bid him drink and be happy today.
And as Ignacio passed out on the errand, the gendarme who had once leapt into the bull-ring at Santos began roaring,
I want a pull. I want a pull.
He wants it, dear soul, that he may put his arms around it and love it,
Pedro Zurita explained, with a fresh access of weeping.
I too love bulls. I love all things. I love even mosquitoes. All the world is love. That is the secret of the world. I should like to have a lion to play with.
The unmistakable air of back to back against the mainmast being whistled openly in the street caught Henry's attention, and he was crossing his big cell to the window when the grating of a key in the door made him lie down quickly on the floor and feign sleep. Ignacio staggered drunkenly in, bottle in hand, which he gravely presented to Henry.
"With the high compliments of our good jailer, Pedro Zurita,"
he mumbled.
"He says to drink and forget that he must stretch your neck tomorrow."
My high compliments to Signor Pedro Zurita, and tell him from me to go to hell along with his whiskey,
Henry replied. The turnkey straightened up and ceased swaying, as if suddenly become sober.
"Very well, senor,"
he said, then passed out and locked the door. In a rush, Henry was at the window just in time to encounter Francis face to face, and thrusting a revolver to him through the bars.
"Greetings, camarada,"
Francis said.
"We'll have you out of here in a jiffy."
He held up 2 sticks of dynamite, with fuse and caps complete.
"I've brought this pretty crowbar to pry you out. Stand well back in your cell, because real pronto there's going to be a hole in this wall that we could sail the Angelique through. And the Angelique is right off the beach, waiting for you. Now, stand back. I'm going to touch her off. It's a short fuse."
Hardly had Henry backed into a rear corner of his cell when the door was clumsily unlocked and opened to a babel of cries and imprecations, chiefest among which he could hear the ancient and invariable war cry of Latin America,
"Kill the gringo!"
Also, he could hear Raphael and Pedro, as they entered, babbling. The one,
"He is the enemy of brotherly love."
And the other,
"He said I was to go to hell. Is not that what he said, Ignacio?"
In their hands they carried rifles, and behind them urged the drunken rabble, variously armed, from cutlasses and horse pistols to hatchets and bottles. At sight of Henry's revolver they halted, and Pedro, fingering his rifle unsteadily, maundered solemnly,
"Signor Morgan, you are about to take up your rightful abode in hell."
But Ignacio did not wait. He fired wildly and widely from his hip, missing Henry by half the width of the cell, and going down the next moment under the impact of Henry's bullet. The rest retreated precipitately into the jail corridor, where, themselves unseen, they began discharging their weapons into the room. Thanking his fortunate stars for the thickness of the walls, and hoping no ricochet would get him, Henry sheltered in a protecting angle and waited for the explosion. It came. The window and the wall beneath it became all one aperture. Struck on the head by a flying fragment, Henry sank down dizzily, and as the dust of the mortar and the powder cleared, with wavering eyes he saw Francis apparently swim through the hole. By the time he had been dragged out through the hole, Henry was himself again. He could see Enrico Solano and Ricardo, his youngest born, rifles in hand, holding back the crowd forming up the street, while the twins Alvarado and Martinez similarly held back the crowd forming down the street. But the populace was merely curious, having its lives to lose and nothing to gain if it attempted to block the way of such masterful men as these who blew up walls and stormed jails in open day. And it gave back respectfully before the compact group as it marched down the street.
"The horses are waiting up the next alley,"
Francis told Henry as they gripped hands.
"And Leonicia is waiting with them. 15 minutes gallop will take us to the beach, where the boat is waiting."
Say, that was some song I taught you.
Henry grinned.
It sounded like the very best little bit of All Right when I heard you whistling it. The dogs were so previous they couldn't wait till tomorrow to hang me. They got full of whiskey and decided to finish me off right away. Funny thing, that whiskey. An old caballero turned peddler wrecked a wagon load of it right in front of the jail.
"For even a noble Narvaez, son of Baltazar de Jesus Carvalhos et Narvaez, son of General Narvaez of martial memory, may be a peddler, and even a peddler must live, eh, senors? Is it not so?"
Francis mimicked. Henry looked his gleeful recognition and added soberly,
"Francis, I'm glad for one thing. most damn glad.
Which is?
Francis queried in the pause, just as they swung around the corner to the horses.
That I didn't cut off your ears that day on the calf when I had you down and you insisted.
End of Chapter 5 of Hearts of Three by Jack London.
The Making of a Christmas Story from Happy Days by A. Miln. Author, read by Wayne Cook.
Editor, read by Greg Giordano.
Alice, read by Lynette Calkins.
Robert Hardrow, read by Mozart Jr.
Elsie, read by Eliza.
Yuletide. London at Yuletide. A mantle of white lay upon the embankment where our story opens, gleaming and glistening as it caught the rays of the cold December sun. An embroidery of white fringed the trees, and under a canopy of white the proud palaces of Savoy and Cecil reared their silent heads. The mighty river in front was motionless, for the finger of death had laid its icy hand upon it. Above, the hard blue sky stretching to eternity. Below, the white purity of innocence. London in the grip of winter.
Come, I like this. This is going to be good. A cold day, was it not?
Very. All at once the quiet of the morning was disturbed. In the distance a bell rang out, sending a joyous paean to the heavens. Another took up the word, and then another and another. Westminster caught the message from Bartholomew, the son of thunder, and flung it to Giles without, who gave it gently to Andrew by the wardrobe. Suddenly the air was filled with bells, all chanting together of peace and happiness, mirth and jollity, a frenzy of bells. The Duke, father of 4 fine children, waking in his Highland castle, heard and smiled as he thought of his little ones. The merchant prince, turning over in his magnificent residence, heard and turned again to sleep, with love for all mankind in his heart. The pauper in his workhouse, up betimes, heard and chuckled at the prospect of his Christmas dinner. And on the embankment, Robert Hardrow, with a cynical smile on his lips, listened to the splendid irony of it.
We really are getting to the story now, are we not?
That was all local color. I want to make it quite clear that it was Christmas.
Yes, quite so. This is certainly a Christmas story. I think I shall like Robert, do you know?
It was Christmas Day. So much at least was clear to him. With that same cynical smile on his lips, he pulled his shivering rags about him, and half unconsciously felt at the growth of beard about his chin. Nobody would recognize him now. His friends, as he had thought them, would pass by without a glance for the poor outcast near them. The women that he had known would draw their skirts away from him in horror. Even Lady Alice. Lady Alice, the cause of it all. His thoughts flew back to that last scene, but 24 hours ago, when they had parted forever. As he had entered the hall, he had half wondered to himself if there could be anybody in the world that day happier than himself. Tall, well-connected, vice-president of the Tariff Reform League, and engaged to the sweetest girl in England. He had been the envy of all. Little did he think that that very night he was to receive his congé. What mattered it now how or why they had quarrelled? A few hasty words, a bitter taunt, tears, and then the end. A last cry from her,
"Go, and let me never see your face again."
A last sneer from him,
"I will go, but first give me back the presents I have promised you."
Then a slammed door and silence. What use, without her guidance, to try to keep straight any more. Bereft of her love, Robert had sunk steadily. Gambling, drink, morphia, billiards, and cigars, he had taken to them all, until now, in the wretched figure of the outcast on the embankment, you would never have recognized the once spruce figure of handsome Hardrow.
It all seems to have happened rather rapidly, does it not? 24 hours ago he had been—
You forget this is a short story. Handsome Hardrow. How absurd it sounded now. He had let his beard grow, his clothes were in rags, a scar over one eye testified—
Yes, of course. I quite admit that a man might go to the bad in 24 hours. But would his beard grow as—
Look here, you've heard of a man going grey with trouble in a single night, haven't you?
Certainly.
Well, it's the same idea as that.
Ah, quite so, quite so.
Where was I?
A scar over one eye was just testifying. I suppose he had two eyes in the ordinary way?
Testified to a drunken frolic of an hour or two ago. Never before, thought the policeman, as he passed upon his beat, had such a pitiful figure cowered upon the embankment, and prayed for the night to cover him. He was...
Yes?
To tell the truth, I'm rather stuck for the moment.
What is the trouble?
I don't quite know what to do with Robert for 10 hours or so.
Couldn't he go somewhere by a local line?
This is not a humorous story. The point is that I want him to be outside a certain house some 20 miles from town at 8 o'clock that evening.
If I were Robert, I should certainly start at once.
No, I have it. As he sat there, his thoughts flew over the bridge of years, and he was wafted on the wings of memory to other and happier Yuletides. That Christmas when he had received his first bicycle. That Christmas abroad. The merry house party at the place of his Cambridge friend. Yuletide at the Towers, where he had first met Alice. Ah! 10 hours passed rapidly thus. I put stars to denote the flight of years.
Besides, it will give the reader time for a sandwich.
Robert got up and shook himself.
One moment. This is a Christmas story. When are you coming to the Robin?
I really can't be bothered about robins just now. I assure you that all the best Christmas stories begin like this nowadays. We may get to a robin later. I cannot say.
We must. My readers expect a robin, and they shall have it, and a wassail bowl, and a turkey, and a Christmas tree, and a—
Yes, but wait. We'll come to little Elsie soon, and then perhaps it will be all right.
Little Elsie. Good.
Robert got up and shook himself. Then he shivered miserably as the cold wind cut through him like a knife. For a moment he stood motionless, gazing over the stone parapet into the dark river beyond. And as he gazed, a thought came into his mind. Why not end it all? Here and now. He has nothing to live for. One swift plunge and—
You forget. The river was frozen.
Dash it, I was just going to say that. But no, even in this, fate was against him. The river was frozen over. He turned away with a curse. What happened afterwards, Robert never quite understood. Almost unconsciously he must have crossed one of the numerous bridges which span the river and join North London to South. Once on the other side, he seemed to have set his face steadily before him, and to have dragged his weary limbs on and on, regardless of time and place. He walked like one in a dream, his mind drudged by the dull narcotic of physical pain. Suddenly he realized that he had left London behind him, and was in the more open spaces of the country. The houses were more scattered. The recurring villa of the clerk had given place to the isolated mansion of the stockbroker. Each residence stood in its own splendid grounds, surrounded by the fine old forest trees, and approached by long carriage sweep. Electric.
Quite so. The whole forming a magnificent estate for a retired gentleman. Never mind that.
Robert stood at the entrance to one of these houses, and the iron entered into his soul. How different was this man's position from his own! What right had this man, a perfect stranger, to be happy and contented in the heart of his family, while he, Robert, stood a homeless wanderer, alone in the cold? Almost unconsciously he wandered down the drive, hardly realizing what he was doing, until he was brought up by the gay lights of the windows. Still without thinking, he stooped down and peered into the brilliantly lit room above him. Within all was jollity. Beautiful women moved to and fro, and the happy laughter of children came to him.
Elsie!
He heard someone call, and a childish treble responded,
Now for the robin.
I am very sorry. I have just remembered something rather sad. The fact is that 2 days before, Elsie had forgotten to feed the robin, and in consequence it had died before the story opens.
That is really very awkward. I have already arranged with an artist to do some pictures, and I remember I particularly ordered a robin and a wassail. What about the wassail?
Elsie always has her porridge upstairs. A terrible thought had come into Robert's head. It was nearly 12 o'clock. The house party was retiring to bed. He heard the good nights wafted through the open window. The lights went out to reappear upstairs. Presently they too went out, and Robert was alone with the darkened house. The temptation was too much for a conscience already sodden with billiards, golf, and cigars. He flung a leg over the sill and drew himself gently into the room. At least he would have one good meal. He too would have his Christmas dinner before the end came. He switched the light on and turned eagerly to the table. His eyes ravenously scanned the contents. Turkey, mince pies, plum pudding. All was there as in the days of his youth.
This is better. I ordered a turkey, I remember. What about the mistletoe and holly? Rather think I asked for some of them.
We must let the readers take something for granted.
I am not so sure. Couldn't you say something like this? Holly and mistletoe hung in the festoons upon the wall.
Indeed, even holly and mistletoe hung in festoons upon the wall.
Thank you.
With a sigh of content, Hardrow flung himself into a chair and seized a knife and fork. Soon a plate liberally heaped with good things was before him. Greedily he set to work, with the appetite of a man who had not tasted food for several hours.
Good evening,
Said a voice.
Are you Father Christmas?
Robert turned suddenly and gazed in amazement at the white-robed figure in the doorway.
Elsie,
he murmured huskily.
How did he know? And why huskily?
He didn't know, he guessed, and his mouth was full.
Are you Father Christmas?
Repeated Elsie. Robert felt his chin and thanked heaven again that he had let his beard grow. Almost mechanically he decided to wear the mask, in short, to dissemble.
Yes, my dear,
he said.
I just looked in to know what you would like me to bring you.
You're late, aren't you? Oughtn't you to have come this morning?
This is splendid. This quite reconciles me to the absence of the robin. But what was Elsie doing downstairs?
I'm making Robert ask her that question directly.
Yes, but just tell me now, between friends.
She had left her gollywog in the room and couldn't sleep without it.
I knew that was it.
If I'm late, dear,
said Robert with a smile.
Why, so are you.
And the good food and wine in his veins were doing their work, and a pleasant warmth was stealing over Hardrow. He found to his surprise that airy banter still came easily to him.
To what,
he continued,
do I owe the honor of this meeting?
I came downstairs for my dolly,
said Elsie.
the one you sent me this morning. Do you remember?
Of course I do, my dear.
And what have you brought me now, Father Christmas?
Robert started. If he was to play the role successfully, he must find something to give her now. The remains of the turkey, a pair of finger bowls, his old hat, all these came hastily into his mind and were dismissed. He had nothing of value on him. All had been pawned long ago. Stay, the gold locket studded with diamonds and rubies which contained Alice's photograph, the one memento of her that he had kept, even when the pangs of starvation were upon him. He brought it from its resting place next to his heart.
A little something to wear round your neck, child,
he said.
See.
Thank you,
said Elsie.
Why, it opens.
Yes, it opens,
said Robert moodily.
Why, it's Alice, Sister Alice.
Ha!
I thought you'd like that. Robert leapt to his feet as if he'd been shot.
Who?
He cried.
My sister Alice. Does you know her too?
Alice's sister. Heavens! He covered his face with his hands. The door opened.
Ha! Again.
What are you doing here, Elsie?
said a voice.
Go to bed, child. Why, who is this?
Father Christmas, Victor.
How exactly do you work the lisping?
What do you mean? Don't children of Elsie's tender years lisp sometimes?
Yes, but just now she said Quistmas quite correctly.
I'm glad you noticed that. That was an effect which I intended to produce. Lisping is brought about by placing the tongue upon the hard surface of the palate, and in cases where the subject is unduly excited or influenced by emotion, the lisp becomes more pronounced. In this case...
Yes, I see.
Send her away,
cried Robert without raising his head. The door opened and closed again.
Well,
said Alice calmly.
And who are you? You may have lied to this poor child, but you cannot deceive me. You are not Father Christmas.
The miserable man raised his shamefaced head and looked haggardly at her.
Alice,
he muttered.
Don't you remember me?
She gazed at him earnestly.
Robert, but how changed!
Since we parted, Alice, much has happened.
Yet it seems only yesterday that I saw you.
It was only yesterday.
Yes, don't interrupt now, please.
To me, it has seemed years.
But what are you doing here?
Said Alice.
Rather, what are you doing here?
Answered Robert.
I think Alice's question was the more reasonable one.
I live here?
Robert gave a sudden cry.
Your house? Then I have broken into your house. Alice, send me away. Put me in prison. Do what you will to me. I can never hold up my head again.
Lady Alice looked gently at the wretched figure in front of her.
I am glad to see you again,
she said,
because I wanted to say that it was my fault.
Alice.
Can you forgive me?
Forgive you? If you knew what my life has been since I left you, if you knew into what paths of wickedness I have sunk, how only this evening, unnerved by excess, I have deliberately broken into this house, your house, in order to obtain food. Already I have eaten more than half a turkey, and the best part of a plum pudding.
With a gesture of infinite compassion, she stopped him.
Then let us forgive each other,
she said with a smile.
A new year is beginning, Robert.
He took her in his arms.
Listen,
he said. In the distance the bells began to ring in the new year, a message of hope to all weary travellers on life's highway. It was New Year's Day.
I thought Christmas Day had started on the Embankment. This would be Boxing Day.
I'm sorry, but it must end like that. I must have my bells.
Well, that's all very well. I have a good deal to explain as it is. Some of your story doesn't fit the pictures at all, and it is too late now to get new ones done.
I am afraid I cannot work to order.
Yes, I know. The artist said the same thing. Well, I must manage somehow, I suppose. Goodbye. Rotten weather for August, isn't it?
End of The Making of a Christmas Story by A. Miln.